And we are live. Hello, everybody. This is the beginning of something new here for the Climate Realism Show and the Heartland Institute, and it's a watch party. And if this goes well, we're going to do more of them, including tomorrow for the hearing for the EPA confirmation for Lee Zeldin. Hi, my name is Jim Lakely. I am the Vice President of the Heartland Institute, and thank you for joining us. We're very excited to have with us quite a panel that might be changing here and there as we are going to be watching the hearings live for Chris Wright at the Department of Energy. With us today, we have Sterling Burnett. He's the senior fellow, or I'm sorry, he's the director of the Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. We got Steve Milloy, the climate hoax slayer and the founder of junkscience.com and E&E Legal. We have Marc Morano of CFACT's Climate Depot, and Gregory Wrightstone, Executive Director of the CO2 Coalition, and of course, everybody's favorite, Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow at the Heartland Institute. Fellas and lady, thanks for being here. I know we have other people that are going to be coming in and out of this stream, as who knows how long this hearing is going to go. It could go 3 hours, it could go 6 hours, but we'll be here for the whole thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah,
I love a mega stream. We have awesome guests. It's going to be really fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while, actually, just getting good guys together and talking about something that's happening in real time. And you're going to get to experience it with us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. This is the pregame show. We started a little late. I do want to apologize for people that are watching right now. We started a little bit late. We wanted to start at 8:30, but you know, herding cats and spinning plates technological with technology sometimes is a little more difficult, but we were able to pull it off. So Steve Milloy, I know in the pregame show there was something you wanted to show today before we got started that's not necessarily related to the hearing today, but let's talk.
I guess I'll just kick it off with 2 points. Number one, so this is the confirmation hearing for Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary. He would be the first Energy Secretary since the department was formed, almost 50 years ago, to actually have energy industry experience. I think that's pretty remarkable. Everybody else has just been a hack politician or a hack scientist. But Wright has been in the energy business. He's become a billionaire. He's got big companies in fracking. I mean, and fracking is 90% of our oil production. So this is, most conservatives often question whether we need the Department of Energy, and I do as well. But if we're going to have it, as long as we have one, he's probably the good guy to lead it. The other thing I wanted to mention was in today's Washington Post, of course, Wright is a relatively outspoken climate denier, of course, and the Washington Post focuses on that today. And it's really actually an interesting article because the reporter Maxine Joslow actually quotes Bjorn Lomborg, which is unusual for the Washington Post. And she juxtaposes his comments versus those from Michael Mann and Andrew Dessler. And but Joslow and Dessler and Mann bring up this study that came out of Nature last week about weather whiplash and how weather whiplash is leading to hot, dry conditions, which then they try to link to the Los Angeles fires. But if you look at the study, and Andy, this would be a good time for that chart, maybe. If you look at the study, there are no hot, dry conditions in Los Angeles, or nothing unusual. As a matter of fact, hot, dry conditions are actually declining in Los Angeles. So it's the exact opposite of what they're trying to say. I mean, these people are such liars. Jeff Bezos had this commentary in explaining why the Washington Post was not going to endorse a presidential candidate in November. Bezos said that, look, we're losing credibility. We've got to be more accurate. Reality is what matters. And these guys, the reporters just don't care. I mean, the Washington Post is hemorrhaging money, hemorrhaging credibility, and they still publish this crap. So,
they've got a whole climate desk, right?
Yeah.
Regular column because it's not the war desk, it's not the U.S. progress desk or whatever. They got a whole climate desk.
Yeah, they report more on climate than any media outlet, even more than The Guardian, I think. And it had seemed to me that at least during the election, they had reported less on climate, or less often tried to link climate to bad events. But it has picked up again, and I guess with Trump, they're probably going to keep doing it. I don't know.
I want to respond to Ed's. I want to respond to Ed's comment. He says he hopes it'll be less contentious than yesterday's Hesketh hearing. I don't know if it'll be less contentious, but it will be less personal, I think. The bits of the hearing I heard yesterday were all about personality. They were all character assassination. There was very little substance discussed. They didn't ask him about foreign wars and whether, you got ongoing conflicts the Department of Defense is in one way or another involved in. Nothing about what his job would be, really. It was all about personal things. It was all about slanderous things. You haven't heard that in the run up to Wright. I don't know if that means that his character is beyond reproach, but the attacks have been more substantive, and so I think the hearings might be a little bit more substantive.
Yeah, but Sterling, don't you think that, Wright is going to eat their lunch? He knows more about all these things than these people can, if you added them all together and multiplied by infinity. He's just going to be, they know nothing compared to what he knows.
That's right.
He's been in the business. He probably knows a little bit about climate. He knows Greg Wrightstone, and if you know Greg Wrightstone, you must know something about climate. So those guys got to be in trouble. I wouldn't even. I would just vote yes and move on.
I'd like to point out too, so for the audience who might not be familiar with Chris Wright's background, he is CEO, I think, of a company called Liberty Energy. Liberty is one of the only oil field companies in the world that, instead of apologizing for oil and gas, actually goes on the offensive and has it's the best thing in the world. If you go on their website, where they have the ESG tab.
Yep.
They have a report called Bettering Human Lives, and it's their ESG report. And they, instead of having a long thing where they're like, well, we're going to reduce emissions, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Instead, the Bettering Human Lives report actually has an entire section talking about how extreme weather is not getting worse. It has the data on climate issues that are popular in the media, and it has a bunch of stuff showing how energy dense energy sources like oil and gas have actually saved lives and have helped people around the world. So their position isn't about reaching net zero in terms of emissions. Their goal as a company is to reach net zero in terms of energy poverty. And that is a fantastic position to take. Man, if companies like Exxon and them had taken that decades ago, we would not be in the place that we are today with regards to the climate alarmists.
The majors are apologists. They say, we produce oil. Fred Smith, late of CEI, used to talk about pollution and companies and being apologist, and it's like the idea of I'm beating my wife less now. I used to beat her a lot, but I don't beat her as much now. Well, the oil companies are like, we produce oil and it's good and all that, but we're producing less now because we're going to net zero, and we expect to produce even less in the future. Wright's not like that. It's like, no.
Yeah. Sterling, I had a chance to sit down with Chris. It was about a year ago in his Denver office on a Saturday. We met there and we had a long conversation, and he sounds like me or you. He doesn't like the net zero, as Linnea said. He is my favorite quote from him. I posted here in the chat was really, he's opposed to net zero carbon, but he embraces net zero energy poverty, which is just a great thing to do. And you're right, Linnea, if you go to Liberty Energy and click on that ESG tab, you'll be amazed. It's just a wonderful document supporting.
And I used to have a physical copy of that thing laying around somewhere around here. He passes it out at like every meeting he meets people at, and it's like a tome. It's a
Oh, it is. Yeah, we've got. When I joined him, he gave me he gave me 2, and I said, "Can I have some more?" I ended up taking 10 back, and we if you come to the CO2 Coalition offices, you'll have it on our reception desk here. We've still got 3 left, but it's wonderful, and he's a breath of fresh air. He brings truth, and he brings such an expertise. He knows what he's talking about.
I'd like to show. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'd like to show. I'm gonna share my screen for a second here because I'd like to show something from the ESG report that's particularly awesome. Let me share real quick. Can you see it?
Now we can.
Okay. In their ESG report, they have the example of what happened when Sri Lanka banned the importation and use of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides, which is something that we hammer on in climate realism all the time. Was, the fact that rice production fell by a massive %. They had starvation where they didn't have starvation before, and they like burned their president's house down because they were so mad at the terrible conditions that were thrust upon them by this like green madness. It's really, really incredible to see a company even mention something like this. It's really a fantastic report. I recommend viewers of this stream to go glance through it because I have yet to find anything in this that indicates to me any kind of like unrealistic position on many of these important topics. So it's awesome.
Cool. We'll try to we will try to share a link. That's online? So if there's a link to that, we'll try to share it in the chat for other people to check out. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, Jim, and Steve mentioned about how qualified Chris is, that he's the most qualified Department of Energy secretary ever. And that's not a high bar to get over, because most of these people like Granholm that think that the electricity comes from a plug in the wall and not from coal-fired power.
Yeah, people kind of forget the change of administration. It's not just addition. There's also the addition by subtraction. It's reversing bad policies and putting more competent people in there. Let's see. There's a couple comments here already from our viewers, and we have more than 1,000 people on all platforms checking us out already. And the hearing hasn't even started yet, so this is fantastic. I wanted to put a couple of these up and maybe get some comments from you guys. Here's John Droz, who is a friend of Heartland and a friend of the show. A lot of us here on the stream know who he is. He says, hopefully Chris Wright will ditch the all of the above energy policy, which makes no technical, economic, or environmental sense. I'm recommending all of the sensible. Steve, what do you think about that? I mean, this whole idea of all of the above energy policy is some kind of hedge that a lot of people, Republicans, seem to favor these days.
Yeah, I always thought it was ridiculous. I worked in the coal industry for a long time, and even my boss, Bob Murray, who's one of the most aggressive coal CEOs out there, he would talk about all of the above because it was politically safe. I mean, it seemed to allow for wind and solar, where they make sense. Of course, they never make sense. Wind and solar have only raised electricity prices. They have not produced any benefits whatsoever, except to the criminals that are able to steal taxpayer subsidies. So, all of the above is just something. It's a phrase that Republicans need to brainwash themselves of.
What is it? Jason Isaac always said all that. I always like all that makes sense economically. You want reliability and you want low cost, and that's
I don't even think we need these phrases. I mean, what makes sense is fossil fuels and maybe nuclear power.
Hydro,
what the world needs
in some places.
Yeah, there's no substitute for any of that stuff so far.
Yeah, and it's I just wanted to add here that if it's about to start here, I think that Chris Wright the yin versus yang we're about to go through, from Jennifer Granholm to Chris Wright, is perhaps one of the greatest things we've ever seen. As everyone's saying here, he is the most qualified. He is someone who is outspoken. He gets it. He can go in the ins and outs of energy. I'm really looking forward to how the senators who try to discredit him and go after the denier label do. By the way, one thing I wanted to mention is Steve was talking about the Washington Post today. The Washington Free Beacon had a great report in October about the Washington Post's favorite environmental group uses political research to link climate change and natural disaster, and it's bankrolled by the owner, Jeff Bezos. So he set up this group to claim all these links to natural disasters, that climate's causing it. And then, of course, the Washington Post reporters cite it, given their bosses funding these actual studies and support. But what I was going to say, just to set the stage here very quickly, if we have the video ready, Jennifer Granholm, our current energy secretary in 2018, appeared in a video literally calling for oil to stay in the ground and to keep fossil fuels in the ground. She sang about the end of fossil fuels. Not only did she endorse the video, she appeared in it singing "Gasoline, Gasoline, the world is aflame." And this was a video by a group called Cultura, some environmental group. Bill McKibben was involved with it. And if we can show that, because I just wanted people to set the stage. We're about to hear Chris Wright go through this confirmation process. Look at the load of BS for an energy secretary we have now. This is our freaking energy secretary praising the end of gasoline, the end of oil, the end of fossil fuels by claiming the world is afire, appearing in a video singing. If we have that video ready.
Love affair with gasoline and soaring costs, forcing drivers, abandoned, gas-powered, where you live, gas prices are going up.
You took me for a ride and now we're lost. I'm choking on your pollution train.
You're making me cough, you're turning me off. I'm breaking this relationship.
Gasoline, gasoline, you're driving me insane. Gasoline, gasoline, the world's aflame. Gasoline, gasoline,
I found someone new, someone better
than you. We had a good run, but now we're done. You're poisoning our atmosphere.
You don't even care, pumping dirt in our air, leading us on, the end is near.
You fossil fool, I reject your rules.
We gotta leave you in the ground. I'm out of the door with my foot to the floor. We gotta leave you in the ground.
Gasoline, gasoline, you're driving me insane. Gasoline, gasoline,
The world's aflame.
gasoline, gasoline. I found someone new, someone better.
Better than you.
Of course it has a sax solo. Oh, God.
All right. Well, you saw Jennifer Granholm there. I don't know if you want to keep going, but she's in.
No.
No,
So-
please, no.
All right. Well, this is the idea, though, just to set the stage. The video you just saw was our energy secretary a mere 3 years before she assumed the position. This was her worldview, partnering up with Bill McKibben, partnering up with people who want to keep fossil fuels in the ground. The same people, by the way, who talk about keeping fossil fuels in the ground, but can't stop using it lavishly at 30,000 feet in their private jets. But that is the contrast we're about to see. And I think that's an important set to the stage as the hearings are about to begin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look what we're going to lose, guys. We're going to lose a Department of Energy
All right.
that takes this kind of stuff seriously.
I think they are beginning the hearing now, so we should probably hop over there
Are they?
and pull it up on C-SPAN.
All right. Let's see.
I have to go get my popcorn. This will be good.
Yeah. Well, they have I see on the live webcast on the committee's own website. It's still there's no video running, but there's a card up that says that they're ready to go. But,
And I think we
we'll
just
make sure to get that up when it's time.
I think we also just had another guest show up in our stream if we can pull him in.
Yep.
Carbon King.
The Carbon King is here. Welcome.
All right. Well, C-SPAN shows that it's not quite started yet, but it will be going soon. I'm sure that the Congress critters or the senators are milling around.
Yeah,
If you
hear
saw
audio-
yesterday, I hear that they all drink apparently before they go to vote. So maybe that's what they're doing.
Yeah, the hearing has started. I see it started now, so I don't know why C-SPAN doesn't have it.
They probably have a delay in case someone curses. Like a lot
I
of
guess so. It's the opening. It's the opening. I was wondering where the sound was coming from. It's the opening statement from Mike Lee. So,
well, I'm gonna pull a question from one of the people in our audience, which is from William Napier, who says, "Will the Keystone Pipeline be resurrected again under the new administration?" My guess is no, because it's not the administration necessarily that has control over whether or not that goes forward, more than the company that's involved in building it. And the company involved in building it has already said that they've called it quits. They're just done with the whiplash between each new administration. They just can't afford it anymore.
Yeah, I was at the American Petroleum Institute meeting in DC yesterday, and that came up, and it is deader than a doornail. So anyone out there who thinks, oh, Trump's saying we're going to have the Keystone Pipeline. No, the financial backers, all the politicians, all the companies, there's just no there. It's done. It's kaput. And it's exactly like Linnea said. No company, no investors are going to hang around decades, continuing waiting. Oh, is this going to work? And we'll put all in. And 4 years later, it's all pulled again. It's over. And this is one of the realities of this yin yang system we have right now.
That's it. They learned their lesson. They talk about the weather whiplash. No, it's the policy whiplash that the Keystone people suffered. It's like, no, I can't afford to sink millions of dollars into trying to get something built.
Gavin Newsom, give him credit. He promotes and provides policy regulatory certainty in California. I won't curse, but you're ruined for decades to come. So
yeah,
he provides that certainty.
Yeah. Hello, Jason Isaac,
Carbon
Carbon King.
Hey, Jim. How are you?
Welcome to the stream. Good to see you. You're the CEO of the American Energy Institute. You're, I think, a 2-time, maybe 3-time guest on the Climate Realism Show on Fridays. So it's good to have you here for our little hangout watch party.
Yeah, it's great to be back. I'm looking forward to this. This is probably one of the confirmation hearings I'm most excited about. I think yesterday was probably maybe one of the ones with the biggest fireworks, but I think today will be one of the ones with the biggest substance. So I'm most excited about today's, and I know there's some tomorrow and other ones, but Chris Wright, I've known him since 2018. He's a member of our trade organization, or at least he was when Liberty Energy, he's founder and CEO. I don't know if he's officially stepped out of the role of CEO. I believe he has, but Liberty Energy in Denver is a member of our trade organization. So he's just been a huge advocate for bettering human lives, which is the name of a report that he puts out. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
Oh, there we are.
All right, well, here we've got started. So let's listen. This is Senator Mike Lee.
Maintaining our nuclear stockpile, fostering innovation through research and development, and ensuring affordable, reliable energy for the people. If confirmed, Mr. Wright, you'll lead an agency with the potential to transform our energy future for the better. Your track record as the founder and leader of Liberty Energy speaks volumes about your qualifications and about the expertise and know-how that you bring to the job. You understand the energy sector and the many challenges that it faces, including and especially those from the government. I'm eager to hear your plans for refocusing the Department of Energy on what ought to be its core mission: ensuring energy security, driving innovation, and lowering costs for American families. American energy security is American national security. You cannot separate them. They are inextricably intertwined. Producing more energy here at home is a national imperative, and I look forward to working with you and your colleagues, the people you will work with at the Department of Energy, as well as my colleagues here on this committee, to ensure that the Department of Energy returns to its founding and all-important purpose. Mr. Wright, the challenges you will face as Secretary of Energy are significant, but so is the opportunity to restore America's standing as an energy superpower. I'm looking forward to the beginning of a collaborative effort to start a new course for our nation's energy policy. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and I look forward to today's discussion. We'll turn now and hear now from our ranking member, Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman Lee. And I want to welcome the new members of this committee, as well as returning members. And happy birthday, Mr. Wright. It's an honor to address you today as the newly appointed ranking member of this committee. And I am honored to represent a state whose economy and whose identity are really so deeply connected to DOE's mission. Sandia and Los Alamos rank among the state's largest employers, offering stable, mission-driven jobs to nearly 30,000 people. In 2023, their combined economic impact on my state reached nearly $9 billion. And these investments have fueled research, development, and scientific progress, driving global advancements in fields such as nuclear science, cybersecurity, clean energy, and materials science. Now, before continuing my remarks, I must express my disappointment that the chair has decided to move forward with this hearing over my objection. Given the fact that, Mr. Wright, your ethics and financial materials arrived yesterday after business hours. I appreciate your responsiveness to my questions, your willingness to meet with me, but I don't think it is too much to ask that members of this committee get 24 hours to review those documents. Mr. Wright, it's unfortunate that our first order of business involved breaking committee precedents. Nevertheless, because my concerns have gone unheeded, we will proceed today. Some secretaries in the past have been surprised to learn that roughly half of DOE's budget supports the nation's nuclear security enterprise through the National Nuclear Security Administration and the cleanup of legacy nuclear waste from weapons produced during the Cold War through the Office of Environmental Management. And although only a fraction of its budget goes to energy research, DOE is still the single largest supporter of basic research in the physical sciences, not just through the Office of Science, but also through the Title 17 Clean Energy Financing Program and the Advanced Research Projects Agency. The Secretary of Energy must recognize the importance of DOE's research and development programs and then at the national labs, and not just for energy production, but also for efficient energy use, national security, cybersecurity, climate change, and maintaining our position of leadership in the world. The Secretary of Energy must also adapt to a rapidly evolving energy landscape, driven by three empirical trends. First, electricity demand is growing for the first time in decades. Advances in generative artificial intelligence technologies and investments in manufacturing and data centers are driving up electricity demand. In fact, nationwide electric demand is expected to grow by 15% in just the next 5 years. Second, distributed renewable energy is getting cheaper. The deployment of renewable energy continues to accelerate exponentially, not in a linear fashion, and consistently outpaces EIA predictions year over year. The pace of this deployment is driving down energy costs, giving Americans more energy freedom to choose how they want to heat and cool their homes or fuel their cars and trucks. Third, clean energy is driving economic growth. According to the International Energy Agency, clean energy accounted for 10% of global GDP growth in 2023. If confirmed, Mr. Wright, you will inherit a department that has received historic levels of investment to fund programs and policies that are literally transforming the U.S. economy. These programs and policies were authorized by landmark legislation, including the Energy Act of 2020, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Oh. And
those investments are paying off. 2 years after CHIPS and Science, companies have announced more than $395 billion of investments in semiconductors and electronics and the creation of over 115,000 jobs, primarily in manufacturing. 2 years after passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, businesses, including battery manufacturers and auto companies, have announced $493 billion of investments, a 71% increase from the 2-year period preceding that legislation. And 3 years after the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the administration announced $568 billion in projects for over 66,000 projects across our country. These landmark laws give the Secretary of Energy new resources and authorities to implement programs and policies that will unlock hundreds of gigawatts worth of solar, wind, and grid battery projects that have been stuck in interconnection queues all around the country. This hearing will provide you with the opportunity to demonstrate to the committee that you will implement Congress's vision of energy abundance and enforce and uphold the laws of the land. I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. And to be clear, we did follow the rules of the committee, and they did not arrive after business hours. They arrived at 5:40 p.m. The bipartisan front office of the committee is in fact open till 6 p.m. And so those came during business hours. We're now going to hear from Senator Hickenlooper, who will be introducing Secretary Wright, or Mr. Wright, soon to be Secretary Wright.
Oops.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member Heinrich. I'm here today to introduce Chris Wright before the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, a fellow Coloradan on his birthday, and someone I've known for a number of years. I first met Chris at a fundraising effort for scholarships for needy kids. We share the fact that we both married way over our heads. His wife Liz is behind him, and like my wife Robin, is far outshines him in many regards. Chris won't be surprised to hear me say that we disagree on a lot of things, and we're almost legendary, probably 12 or 13 years ago at a fancy Easter dinner in the middle of the day, and getting rather heated over some of the issues around energy. And I think what was interesting, my wife was very worried about our hosts and us being invited back, whereas I don't think Chris and I took any offense at all. And I think that, you know, some people will be surprised that I'm introducing him here, and yet he's a scientist who has invested his life around energy. And he is indeed an unrestrained enthusiast for fossil fuels in almost every regard, but he studied nuclear. He started out at University of Colorado, just to be perfectly clear, but somehow he ended up at MIT. One of my associates is known to have haunted. And he studied nuclear there in detail, got a master's. His first years working were in solar. He has experience in wind. He is a practitioner and a key innovator around geothermal and the incredible potential that we have in geothermal. He is a scientist who is open to discussion, and he is, again, a scientist who is a successful entrepreneur and has that ability to assess what is possible and what isn't. Again, I am well known for the last 40 years. I've been worried and working to address climate change, and I worry about the acceleration of the feedback loops that could make what we saw in Los Angeles over the past couple of weeks.
Here we go.
A grim foreshadowing of other events that could come. But I think that what we're looking at now is the need for a comprehensive approach to energy at every regard. Chris has spent a lot of time looking at poverty, not just in this country, but around the world, and how energy affects that, and how it affects the health of people from in different countries. He is fully versed on the assessments we've made, both on this committee and as a Congress in the past couple of years, to make investments around energy, and he respects that. And I think as we go forward, I look forward to continuing the robust discussions, and I'm not going to hold back, and I know that he won't hold back either. And I think that's part of the key of a democracy, is to be able to sit down and really thrash out your beliefs and what the facts are, and be able to measure them. I think we've both learned and evolved over the years on a number of issues, and I have high optimism we can work together.
And I look forward to figuring out what are the best ways and the fastest ways we can address the climate challenges we face. So, Chris, thank you for being willing to do this public service, and I look forward to the discussion.
We'll hear next from Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Chairman Lee, and also Ranking Member Heinrich. Welcome. Welcome to you, Chris, and to your family. It's great to meet all of you. I think it's fantastic that you're here. And of course, Liz, very important that you're here. That was obvious right away when he came in and gave you that huge hug. Moral support is unbelievable. And then to have your mom here is pretty cool on your birthday, 60th birthday. And as far as your grandson, Miles, 7 months, but it's never too soon to start, getting used to Senate hearings. So I think bringing him and kind of getting him used to what goes on is great. I'm really pleased to follow up Senator Hickenlooper. I have great respect for him, your home state senator. He's a trained geologist. He knows energy, and he's worked and helped me on a lot of things. And I'm very pleased to join you in this introduction. And really, it's appropriate because you live in Colorado, but an awful lot of your work's been done in North Dakota, in my state of North Dakota, and you've had a huge, huge impact. When I started as governor in North Dakota in 2001, we produced less than 100,000 barrels of oil, and it was going down. It was going down because we were drilling 14,000-foot vertical wells. There were more cost-effective places to do it. So I started a policy called Empower North Dakota. And it wasn't just about producing more oil and gas. It was about producing energy, as Senator Hickenlooper said, from all sources. And we do in North Dakota now. We are a powerhouse in energy, and you know it well. But it came from creating the right climate, the right legal tax and regulatory climate to encourage energy development. And it came down to getting entrepreneurs, great thinkers, people who were smart, well-trained, and motivated, people who'd gone to places like MIT and Berkeley and had the latest, greatest understanding of technologies and all kinds of things. People who would create companies, like Pinnacle Technologies, that started the hydraulic fracturing mapping industry so folks could figure out where the energy was. And then folks that chaired companies like Stroud Energy, and then started their own companies like Liberty Energy to actually do it, to unlock this energy potential here and do it with the best environmental stewardship, the smallest footprint, right? And as a result of folks like that, North Dakota went from less than 100,000 barrels of oil going down to 1.5 million barrels a day, 1.5 million barrels of oil a day, not to mention all the natural gas with the best environmental stewardship in the world. And the reality is,
that Granholm would shut down
about right now, you and others.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. So if we really want all the above, we need guys.
No, we don't want
like
all
you.
of the above.
Yeah, we do. Right.
We want
Keep saying
affordable
that.
and reliable.
Yeah, affordable, reliable,
One of my favorite presidents used
And
to say,
abundant.
nuclear energy,
all that makes
or
sense.
oil and gas, or anything else. You have that incredible knowledge and understanding and capability to drive this technology to truly make us energy dominant. And that's what we need to focus on. Regardless of what kind of energy you may or may not favor, to truly have an all the above, we need to continue to drive that technology curve. And I can't think of anyone better able to do that based on your training, your education, your interest, your accomplishments, and your experience. And I'm just pleased that you're willing, you and your family are willing to stand up and serve. Thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much. Mr. Wright, we're now going to swear you in. If you will stand, and I'll administer the oath.
Showtime, finally.
Let's go.
You solemnly swear that the
Did I
testimony
miss
you're about to
anything?
give to the Senate
No.
Committee on Energy and Natural
No, nothing
Resources
exciting.
will be
No,
the
nothing
truth, the whole
exciting.
truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Now, I will now ask you 3 questions before you turn to your opening statement. 3 questions that we ask to each nominee before this committee. Will you be available to appear before the committee and other congressional committees to represent the department positions and respond to issues of concern to Congress?
I will.
Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that could constitute a conflict of interest to create the appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you've been nominated by the president?
I am not.
Are you involved, or do you have any assets held in a blind trust?
I do not.
Thank you. Now, you may proceed with your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Heinrich, and members of the committee. Thank you also to Senator Hickenlooper and Senator Hoeven for your kind remarks, friendship, and for your continued service to our centennial state and great nation. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to recognize the members of my family who have joined me today. My wife, Liz, my daughter, Skylar, and her husband, Greg, my 7-month-old grandson's Miles, my son, Arthur, his fiancee, Aloel. Also in the crowd, not needing identification, is my mother, Gayla, sister, Kim, many other extended family, and friends as well. The most fortunate event in my very fortunate life was meeting my wife, Liz, when I was 18 years old. I came home that night and told my sister that I had met the woman that I would marry. It is truly an honor to appear before this committee as President-elect Trump's nominee for Secretary of Energy. I am humbled by the great responsibility this position holds. America has an historic opportunity to secure our energy systems, deliver leadership in scientific and technological innovation, steward our weapons stockpiles, and meet Cold War legacy waste commitments. I call myself a science geek turned tech nerd turned lifelong energy entrepreneur. My fascination with energy started at a young age in Denver, Colorado. I enrolled at MIT specifically to work on fusion energy. I started graduate school at UC Berkeley, where I worked on solar energy as well as power electronics. Energy is the essential agent of change that enables everything that we do, everything. A low energy society is poor. A highly energized society can bring health, wealth, and opportunity for all. The stated mission of the company that I founded, Liberty Energy, is to better human lives through energy. Liberty works directly in oil, natural gas, next generation geothermal, and has partnerships in next generation nuclear energy and new battery technology. Energy has been a lifelong passion of mine, and
Here we go. The mentally ill people have invaded the room and interrupting
Did they
his
check
introduction.
people for orange paint?
Energy has been a lifelong passion of mine, and I've never been shy about that fact. Then again, I've never been shy about much. President Trump shares my passion for energy, and if confirmed, I will work tirelessly to implement his bold agenda as an unabashed steward for all sources of affordable, reliable, and secure American energy. I see 3 immediate tasks where I'll focus my attention if I get the privilege of being confirmed. The first is to unleash American energy at home and abroad to restore our energy dominance. The security of our nation begins with energy. Previous administrations have viewed energy as a liability instead of the immense national asset that it is. To compete globally, we must expand energy production, including commercial nuclear and liquefied natural gas, and cut the cost of energy for Americans. Second, we must lead the world in innovation and technology breakthroughs. Throughout my lifetime, technology and innovation have immeasurably enhanced the human condition. We must protect and accelerate the work of the department's national laboratory network to secure America's competitive advantage and its security. I commit to working with Congress on the important missions of the national laboratories. Third, we must build things in America again and remove barriers to progress. Federal policies today make it too easy to stop projects and very hard to start and complete projects. This makes energy more expensive and less reliable. President Trump is committed to lowering energy costs, and to do so, we must prioritize cutting red tape, enabling the private sector investments, and building the infrastructure we need to make energy more affordable for families and businesses. I've met with almost every member of the committee, and I appreciate the perspective, priorities, and insight that you have shared. As a nerdy guy who reads and studies data, I will need the guidance and partnership of this committee. I feel confident we can work together to make a difference. I look forward to answering your questions and, if confirmed, shepherding the president's bold energy agenda to unleash energy security and prosperity. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to answering the committee's questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. We'll now proceed to 5-minute rounds with Democrats and Republicans alternating in order of seniority and order of arrival. We'll begin those right now. Mr. Wright, the Liberty Energy's Bettering Human Lives report is something I find an informative document. I've got a copy of it right here. It's something that brings what I regard as a pretty clear-headed perspective to the climate change dialogue, which I think has been sorely missing in our discussion of many of these issues. As with anything that we do, and basically everything that we build, there are trade-offs. In energy, there are trade-offs at the nexus of energy security, energy poverty, economic prosperity, upward mobility, and various environmental considerations. The U.S. Department of Energy can play a pivotal role, but unfortunately, during the Biden administration, we've seen many levers within our system of government, including and especially the Department of Energy, being used as part of a quote-unquote whole of government approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and doing this without considering the consequences of this kind of unbalanced approach. The trade-offs that I mentioned aren't really taken into a consideration. It's one objective taken into account as part of a whole of government approach that has really harmed a lot of American families. So how, in your view, can and should the Department of Energy focus on energy abundance? And how will doing that help to restore the balance that American energy policy has been lacking over the last 4 years?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and for the points you made. Yes, energy is hard, but it is critical for our civilization and for the prosperity and security of our country. The Department of Energy, I'll start with just the magnificent 17 national labs, that this launched during World War II, and were a key part of actually America winning that war and securing a post-war peace. Our labs have been pioneers in energy innovation across the spectrum. Very important for me is to keep the labs focused and energized to work on science, basic fundamental science, but also science that will someday, and maybe someday soon, have applications to energy. Our labs have a proud track record
these
there,
national labs
and I want to champion
science.
And
They
the
don't do
labs and
science.
the energy department
And they have been for about 30 years.
Across the energy spectrum, with reasonable involvement in virtually every meaningful.
What was that again, Steve? I think we maybe didn't hear you.
So
yeah, these national labs that he's talking about don't do science anymore. They do junk science. I mean, they really lost their focus when the Cold War ended, and they just been turned into laboratories of junk science for the government. National laboratories haven't helped us with energy at all. What's helped us is Chris Wright and fracking and the coal industry and the nuclear power industry that we had, without the national labs.
Yeah, we don't need the national labs. The labs were short-term, necessary for the war. And when they were doing defense stuff, that made some sense. But I mean, to have a whole lab, I forget which one it is, devoted to renewable energy. I forget whether it's
and also didn't like the tenor of Lee's question, this sort of notion that there are trade-offs, like there's some benefit to reducing greenhouse gases. As Greg Wrightstone can tell us, there's no benefit from reducing greenhouse gases. It's quite the opposite. There's no trade-off. And Republicans suck at that. They just don't get that concept.
Well, they want to be Me Too. They want to go to the same dinner parties and not be yelled at for having the incorrect views on climate.
Well, and part of it's the marketing that's been done by the left, and those so-called people on the right that say they embrace energy and all of the above. They're spending billions of dollars to visit with these policymakers and their staffs and just infiltrate their minds with information that's contrary to the facts, math, and science. And so that's all they hear over and over and over again. And we're this small army that's trying to counter that. And I guess it gives us room to grow and expand, but we shall see.
Well, all these Republican, senators and congressmen, they have these young staffs who have all, they're not like Linnea. They've all grown up being brainwashed by climate propagandists. And so, they do most of the work, writing the statements, answering the questions, writing the questions. And they really, they could benefit from, learning from us versus just what they got out of public schools or college.
Yeah, we've raised a whole generation of youth, maybe 2 generations of youth, who believe thinking for themselves is the equivalent of thinking whatever their peer group says is true. Their uninformed peer group, their peer group that has no information, their information lacking, and somehow thinking for yourself is thinking what they think.
Yeah, it's like thought slavery. It's bad.
Coordinate with your staff, and if at all possible, we could visit together. But I'm a huge fan of those 2 institutions and look forward to walking their halls.
I appreciate that very much. I would like you to talk a little bit about your divestment plans. You do, and you've mentioned it, a lot of work in the energy space. And we had a conversation about the need to maintain not only the avoidance of conflicts of interest, but also the avoidance of appearances of conflicts of interest. So can you talk a little bit about your plans for divestment?
I agree with all of that, Senator. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur in the energy space. And of course, I have submitted my disclosures of all of my work, and the appropriate ethics counselors within the federal government have
Your fracking liquid put out the fires in LA. I love it. Actually, yes,
depends.
it could.
Yeah, it probably could.
It could.
It's just
But then they go after him for putting forever chemicals into the environment.
Oh my gosh, so funny. And CO2 could put out the fires in LA. I was watching some training videos of fire suppression and people throwing canisters of CO2 into a fire and completely suppressing a fire. I was amazed. It was incredible.
Rule of law. And so I want to ask.
Well, it took the Canadians to finally come in and grab seawater and put it on because American planes apparently don't want to do any environmental damage to California.
Yeah, they might suck up a salamander or something that's out in the oceans.
Yeah, we love CO2, and so should you.
That's right. Yep. Creates more rain. Imagine that.
If the OMB director was to try to direct your department not to fund a program or an activity that Congress had expressly appropriated funding for, would you follow the law?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, my mission, the only way I roll, would be to follow the laws and statutes of the United States of America.
With respect to permitting, this last Congress, this committee actually advanced a comprehensive all of the above permitting bill by a vote of 15-4. That law was not signed into law because we have not reconciled it with the House. But I want to ask you, because included in that package were really important transmission reforms that would actually help us to meet the growing demand that we're seeing due to what's going on in artificial intelligence right now, the increased electrification of our economy, and an incredible bump in manufacturing that we've seen in the last couple of years. So in your view, how important is it that transmission line permitting reform be included as part of any broader permitting reform that we may be able to achieve?
Thanks for that question, Senator, and thanks for also the wonderful dialogue we had in your office. I appreciated that very much, and I note we have lots of overlaps, lots of common interests, lots of common concerns. And we've had roughly 100-year history in the United States of making electricity more affordable on inflation-adjusted terms and our grid more reliable. One of the engineering marvels of modern times. And as we discussed, we've seen that trend reverse. And in the last few years, we've seen electricity prices go up and the reliability of the grid go down. And both of us are very concerned about that, particularly as we're seeing future demand growth. And I agree with you entirely that being able to build new transmission lines, to be able to repower existing transmission lines and grow their capacity, and many other things are very important to meet this growing demand of energy and hopefully return to a trend of a decline in the real cost of electricity and a growth in the reliability. I'm aligned with you there.
I love the comment from Bigfoot. Don't worry, Bigfoot. Those kids that are skipping art classes and gender studies today will get their student loans forgiven in some Democrat administration in the future. So it doesn't matter if they're going to drop out or fail. They won't have jobs. And
through the transmission.
so I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, and this
They won't have jobs.
question, this is more appropriate for FERC, not for
These projects
not for energy.
Yeah.
They won't have jobs, but they may think that their lack of jobs is to blame on CEOs of healthcare companies or oil companies.
Yeah, not that they didn't learn any valuable
No.
skills.
No, they're gonna
gender studies or pop culture studies in school.
No, don't worry. They'll get jobs in the HR departments of major oil companies, and they'll harass field engineers.
Oh.
That's what they'll get to do.
That's a sad commentary on America.
Hopefully it's European oil and gas companies that are implementing their DEI programs.
And yes, I'm aligned with you and will seek to find the best
But
way.
Chris is spot on about grid reliability decreasing, cost for electricity increasing. Martin Heinrich, in his opening remarks, Senator from New Mexico, was completely wrong that costs have gone down, that reliability has increased. Those are completely contrary. And Chris is, I think, setting the record straight and correcting him in his remarks here. That we're staring down the face of what Germany is going through, what the United Kingdom is going through, and that's deindustrialization because of expensive energy. And Chris is well aware of that.
Let's listen to Jim Justice because he used to be a coal CEO.
You know, I'm a new kid on the block. That's for dadgum sure. I'm not a politician. I'm a business guy. And I'm hung up on this. I'm hung up on honor and truth and respect and reason and logic. And you'll find that as we go forward with me. Now, today, I tell you just this. I come from West Virginia. And West Virginia truly knows energy. That's all there is to it. And I would just tell you this, and I would promise you that this will be the case. Energy is everything. Everything. If we think less than that, we are thinking absolutely wrong. At the end of the day, every country of the world, the more energy they have, the healthier they are, the longer they live. Energy is every single everything. It's the key to inflation. It's the key to our defense. It's the dollars that fund the Russian war with Ukraine. It is every single thing. And absolutely, we have to solve this. We have to have a real energy strategy, and we've got to solve this. I've had many, many conversations with President Trump. He absolutely believes exactly just this. So, Chris, in this days ahead, you will have a task beyond belief, in my opinion. With all that being said, I know you will carry on that task in a great, great way. Now, listen, from West Virginia, you may think, that all we can think about is one thing and one thing alone. I would tell you just this. We need to embrace all the energy forms. But with that being said, the moment in time when you absolutely believe that we can do without fossil fuels in this world today, you're living in a cave. You're absolutely living in a cave, in my opinion. We don't need to blow our legs off so China or India can dominate in so many different ways. Absolutely, today we need to solve the whole. And
Here's another person that's suffering from a mental illness that needs to get help, and I hope maybe the DC
I
and
would just
Capitol
tell you
Police
just
require that.
I think that gentleman is misdirected in his thought. But with all that being said, I would always be respectful to that gentleman. And that's how we all ought to be. So with all that being said, I would say just this to Chris. Chris, are you in a position of thinking of embracing all the energy forms, solving the whole riddle? And I'll ask that question just in that way. So please answer.
Senator, thank you for your question and your impassioned remarks. We share a passion for energy. And the reason I sit in front of you today is because President-elect Trump shares a passion for energy and an instinctual understanding that energy is not a sector of the economy. It's the sector of the economy that enables everything else we do. When I met him, he was just on fire about energy. He got how it impacts American quality of life, American economic strength, our geopolitical power, and what the possibilities are for the future, how we can make our children and grandchildren's lives so much better than ours. So I agree with you 100%. Energy is core, it's central. We want energy from all sources we can that can add to our pile of affordable, reliable, secure American energy.
Trump shares a passion for making America great, and he understands that requires energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but as long as energy means fossil fuels, I mean, everybody knows that wind and solar make no sense. There's no place where they've lowered energy costs, where they really, where they provide any benefits. And this, so Jim Justice is, you can tell, as I mentioned before, with my old boss, Bob Murray, their brains are infected with the political correctness of all of the above. And even Wright has it in his, I mean, I know that they're going to do fossil fuels when actually, when the nut cracking time comes, but they really ought to get that idea out of their head and start telling the public and get the idea out of the public's head, but they're not doing that.
Yeah, we ought to look for reliable, abundant, and affordable, those three words.
Yeah.
And if it
But
doesn't meet that,
fossil fuel.
that's fossil fuels.
I guess I disagree a bit. Wind and solar make sense in off-grid uses. If I live on an isolated house in South Dakota not connected to the grid, solar makes sense for me.
Okay, but that's not a federal issue.
Yeah,
It ought not be subsidized.
None of it should be a federal issue.
Yeah, and I'm fine with Jim Justice, the Senator Justice from West Virginia, talking about embracing, but as long as that doesn't mean subsidizing, because I don't want to pay for this unreliable Chinese-made energy. It's inflationary.
Yeah, no, he's against the subsidies. I'm quite sure, but we have to get this idea out of public conversation, public discourse. I mean, this is a bad idea. It legitimizes the subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
Have deep concerns about seeing that facility go ahead, and I think that's your answer.
So President Trump has said he doesn't support waste at Yucca Mountain. So let me ask you again, because you didn't really answer the question. Can Nevadans count on you to acknowledge that the failed Yucca Mountain project is unworkable?
I'm new to politics, as you can see, and you'll see all day long today. I think that has been a clear record that Nevadans oppose the project. I will work with you and with senators across the country to find solutions for long-term disposal of nuclear waste. And I agree with you that a central part of that is going to be local buy-in on the project.
It's not failed just because Nevada rejects it, and disposal shouldn't be the option. Recycling should be.
Well, it is. I mean, Yucca Mountain is designed to store the waste and bring it back up for reprocessing.
Right.
It's in the middle of nowhere. It's a mile underground. EPA has got I believe it's a 1,000,000-year standard. The Department of Energy has to guarantee that the energy stored there will be safe for 1,000,000 years, which is obviously crazy. And this is all based on radiation safety standards developed through the linear no threshold model, which is science fraud. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. And of course, Nevada opposes it because they think it's like having, a fat man or little boy buried 10 feet underground in Las Vegas, and it's not.
Motivated and highly concerned that we need to make progress on the safety and security of the stockpile of our nuclear weapons.
So the Department of Energy provides essential programs and research across all corners of my state. It's critical defense measures at the national security site that you talked about, our workforce cybersecurity collaboration that we have with our universities and colleges in Nevada, the public-private partnerships to create new innovative technologies is actually happening in Nevada, thanks to legislation that we have passed, bipartisan legislation, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure law. Let me ask you this. Would you push back on any attempts by the Trump administration to cut any of these critical programs?
Senator, I appreciate your passion for them. It's too early for me to give any specifics about this program or that program, but is cybersecurity critical for our country? Absolutely. Let me be more specific, because you talked about that when I asked you about the role of DOE. You specifically talked about the national security site in Nevada. Would you push back on the Trump administration if they attempted to cut any critical funding to the programs for the national security site? I will support, to the extent I can, all of our efforts in national security, including those that are in Nevada.
Let me ask you this. You talked about
including
your
Yucca Mountain
comments to some of my colleagues that you want to grow the supply of energy. Define for me the sources of energy you're talking about that you would like to grow.
All sources of affordable, reliable.
What sources are they?
Pure energy.
Sure. Which sources?
It's different sources in different circumstances. I mean, our economy today is underpinned by energy dominantly from oil and natural gas. Coal is a major source of energy in our country. Nuclear power is a major source of energy in our country. Hydropower is a major source of energy in our country. Wind and solar are growing rapidly. And geothermal, particularly in states like Nevada, is early on, but has just potential significant running room to become a meaningful source of energy in the future. And every source of energy that either today or with technology innovation can be a growth engine for affordable, reliable, secure energy. I'm for all of those.
Good. You did not mention solar. Solar is the number1 energy for us in Nevada. It's creating jobs.
He did mention wind and solar.
Our economy has a major impact. So I'm disappointed that I didn't hear solar coming out as a part of the energy, but I assume, I'm not going to assume anything. I'm just going to say the conversation we're going to have and continue to have around energy is important, and it should be balanced and is not just focused on fossil fuels. And no matter what some of my colleagues say, there should be a balanced approach to it for our portfolio for energy, and that's what I'm looking for always.
I agree entirely, Senator. And if I didn't say solar, it was an oversight. I worked in solar energy. You have tremendous resources for that.
The right thing to say here is Nevada would be a wasteland without fossil fuels.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And remind her that wind and solar are made from fossil fuels.
Right.
And they also use fossil fuels.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have to continue to use oil and all of these lubricants to make the windmills continue to.
I would be all for, wind and solar without using fossil fuels. Like, yeah.
Imagine Vegas without the lights and Reno without the lights.
I'm sure this came from one of.
They're not running on solar for sure.
No, I'm sure this came from somebody in this call probably, but I've seen it on Anthony's site before on What's Up With That. How many wind turbines does it take to build a wind turbine?
That's great.
That's funny.
But as we offshore the job.
I'm sure the UN has a
model
model
for working Americans. We lose to a working Chinese.
It probably isn't too much. It probably only takes up the entire space of Russia or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to steal the lube from so many different wind turbines.
She keeps talking about national security, and what she really means is I care about Nevada and Nevadans' concerns, and I don't care about national security because it is not as safe to store spent nuclear fuel on pads and ponds at 100 different locations behind a fence, than it is in a mountain underground, mile underground.
in which we look at the
Right. All those rods are going to have to be reprocessed, and they're going to have to be moved to be reprocessed.
Yeah, it's just that's really a bad national security idea. But it's what we've lived with.
And we put
Those wind turbines are safe anyway, though. You know, you have so many of them that are just being installed and they're already falling down in places. So it's also a hazard. They're not, and it's much more expensive than you have your regular fossil fuels. And if you're talking about other places that have cold weather, like the Midwest, this is not feasible at all.
I think yourself and I and President-elect Trump are very aligned on all of those. And I think you have a creative idea about how do we address some of these asymmetries that have developed. If you look at the data of economic growth in the United States versus manufacturing growth in the United States in economic output, they roughly track for a century. And right after the year 2000, when China is admitted to the World Trade Organization, they diverged dramatically.
with ours going down for the manufacturing and China's manufacturing going up, but also their emission profile exploding at the same time.
100%. And as you said, look, the United Kingdom and Germany and other of our European allies led with us, and they've gone even further on, I think, this destructive habit of just moving their energy-intensive manufacturing out of their country. And then
So I'm taking that as a yes, you'll support my foreign pollution fee. But anyway, let me ask you, because one critical role of DOE is to help calculate the embedded emissions. Now, some fear that, thinking it's going to be some regulatory crackdown. I see it as a way to competitively to outcompete others, because if theirs is here and ours is there, and we know that from this calculation, then that helps our domestic manufacturers. Because there'll be a higher fee.
So this is the carbon adjustment mechanism, the carbon tax Cassidy and Kevin Kramer want to implement. These people are just bad.
Emissions have nothing to do with competitiveness.
Why are we talking about emissions? And Chris Wright should say, I don't really care about emissions. Emissions are stupid. Worrying about emissions is stupid.
yeah. He's got to get confirmed though. So
yeah, no, he should say, if you want competitiveness, then remove the restrictions on energy use and production, and quit subsidizing inefficient fuel energy sources.
Seems like we have another protester.
Compete.
Testimony be delayed until the room is cleared. Please proceed, Mr. Wright.
May I suggest that the people who are protesting look at your monograph on building human lives, because it shows that U.S. emissions have come down in absolute amounts, per capita amounts, every way you want to measure it, since 2000.
Okay, U.S. emissions are not down. We have just exported our emissions. I mean, we may have replaced some coal with gas, but we import so much stuff from China that our emissions have not. You'll know your emissions have gone down when your standard of living goes down.
yeah, I think one of the first times I heard Chris Wright talk about, he was talking about pollution and emissions. And he says the problem today is that policymakers and people, the general public, are conflating the two, when we really need to separate them, because there's really no concern about emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, but there is about pollution. And as we know, we've reduced that nearly 80% over the last 5 decades. We're world leaders in clean air. It's so far beyond anything that improves human health. It's too strict. And we're still continuing to export jobs overseas where they could care less about the environment and human rights. I think Chris is well aware of that.
Yeah, he knows that our air and water.
We don't have air pollution in America anymore. I mean, we're at the point where the ozone from trees competes with anything that is man-made. So
yeah, we proved that during COVID when we took half the cars off the road because of the COVID lockdowns, and air quality didn't improve in the United States. It actually got worse in some cities. It was negligible, but it got worse.
Our air and water have not been this clean since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. It's
that's right. These guys don't know that. They don't know. For some reason, they don't know that. They can't articulate it. Even Trump talks about, we got to have clean air. We have clean air. We have clean water, as clean as it's going to get, considering 350 million people. And
anyone watching here just needs to Google or search for 2 words: EPA and pollution, and you'll find a chart. As bad as EPA is on most things, at least that chart shows the 8 real pollutants all have been in decline for 60 years.
Right.
Yeah,
I
but,
mean,
but EPA has scared people over the last 20 years into believing that any exposure to particulate matter or ozone is bad for you. And you're seeing it now in Los Angeles with the wildfires. They're just scaring people about the wildfire PM. It's crazy.
No, all of this is about increasing taxes on each individual, and they're using green energy to do it.
There you go.
There it
you know,
is.
the horrible thing is that Democrats who are pushing this and claim to care about low and minority communities, they've created a regressive tax on all of those groups so that they're ensured to either be in poverty, be pushed in poverty, or be create a barrier so they can never get out.
Yeah, they're all very proud of being pro-choice. Well, they're not pro-choice. They don't want to give you the choice to what car to drive, how to heat your home, what temperature to heat your home, what kind of shower head to use, what kind of dishwasher, washing machine. They're against choice.
Yeah, and it's not just about taxes, it's about power. It's about telling you how to live because they know best.
Yeah. Let's see what Hickenlooper's talking about here.
System that works. Each of those suggests or command that we should have a backup systems in place.
No, absolutely, Senator. As you know, I've studied and followed the data and the evolution of climate change for at least 20 years now. It is a global issue. It is a real issue. It's a challenging issue. And the solution to climate change is to evolve our energy system. I've worked on that most all of my career. Again, in nuclear and solar and geothermal and new battery storage technology now. Do I wish we could make faster progress? Absolutely. Are there things we can do, investments together through the Department of Energy to accelerate development of new energy technologies that are really the only pathway to address climate change? Absolutely.
Okay, so this is really awful.
We should have nothing but
This comment, awful.
Energy and climate is
so
right? Awful.
Greg,
We don't need to transition.
Awful.
As soon as you get the government involved in developing a product, there's going to be no innovation because the government is always going to subsidize whatever the energy source, in this sense, these less than stable, affordable energy sources. So there's no need for them to innovate because there's no competition. All of their revenues are coming from government grants, subsidies. If you're a private company and you're competing with other companies, then there is an initiative for you to innovate because you have to beat your competitor. In this situation, all of these industries are being propped up by government grants, and so there'll never be any innovation.
further and faster.
This, I think it's going to be the first time I've ever gotten 5 questions in with a testimony. So I'm not sure what that says. We spent a lot of work looking at the grid. And as we do begin to build infrastructure that can respond if we need to make more dramatic changes to our energy system, whether it's climate change or whatever other constraints may come along, we've really been stymied, both in terms of the permitting process and finding ways that we can make sure that we protect local communities, make sure that their voice is heard, make sure that we respect the environmental importance of our landscapes, but at the same time realize we've got to move more rapidly in building things like electrical infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit towards electrical infrastructure?
Yes, Senator. I think you've hit, in the energy world, the most pressing problem we have is our electricity grid. And this problem is only going to get worse. I'm very concerned about that. We need to change the gear we've been in the last several years, and we need to get serious about building infrastructure and investment, bringing the cost of electricity prices back down, and keeping our grid stable. I'm deeply concerned about our current trajectory.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Wright, and this lovely family that you have behind you. I certainly enjoyed our visit in my office when we had the opportunity to discuss the importance of this committee, the importance of what you will be doing and your leadership. Everybody in here, sitting up here, we have economic developers come to our state. And we certainly want economic development. We want good jobs for our citizens. And so much of that is a part of what kind of energy can we provide for that company. So thank you for discussing those things with me, because they're certainly important to my people in Mississippi as well as other states. The Department of Energy themselves, they classify nuclear energy as the largest source of clean power in the United States. And containment, as we well know, is critical to every aspect of nuclear energy. High efficiency particulate air filters, what we refer to as the HEPA filters, are the operational barrier between the containment and the release of radioactive particles. So I'm proud in my home state of at Mississippi State University, where my daughter's in graduate school there, but not in this area. They have been for a long time researching new technologies in order to develop better performances and the capabilities of these HEPA filters for new reactors, containment, ventilation. And this research really plays an important role in advancing the next generation filtration systems that we're all concerned with, because we're certainly concerned about the future of the policies that we're passing now for Miles when he's an adult, of how the things we're talking about today that will affect him. And what do you see as the deficiencies related to containment ventilation issues for waste processing and new generations of power reactors?
So thank you, Senator, for the question, and thank you for our fabulous dialogue and for what you do for the great state of Mississippi. You kept hitting on technology and technology at Mississippi State. Technology really is the key for growing our energy future, for both growing more abundance to better lives.
Yay, 5.
Hey, here we go.
Committee will
Another one.
stand in recess until the
Another clown, hopefully spending time in jail.
Yeah.
So is that 5? Are you keeping track for us, Linnea? We'll have you keep a
Yeah,
ticker
that's
going?
5.
All right.
Look, the Senate chamber is an awful big clown car, so we might see a lot of this.
That's great. LA is burning because of fossil fuels. It's laughable. Nothing to do with cuts to the fire department. They don't clear brush. It's a tinderbox that's been waiting to go up. It's really unfortunate.
How dare you?
I think we
That's
figured
right.
Los Angeles has, look, California has always had bad forest management.
I got to say, I kind of object to this line of question here about and his comments that we need more and more technology. We have plenty of technology to burn these fuels cleanly. We need to produce them. Okay, we need fewer environmental rules which don't accomplish anything and just impose restrictions and costs on energy production. We need more energy production. We have to reindustrialize America. And I know this is a hearing, and he's just like, playing up to whatever their bizarre interests are. But I mean, if we want the public to really learn about what we need and how to get there, we've got to have these people speaking frankly. And this, I don't appreciate this.
The last ones we built took well over a decade.
Yeah. You know what's really going to piss off those protesters? Supporting this stream and this show. So I'll use that as a shameless plug. We could use your support. This is something new we're trying. There's a QR code right here on the screen. If you could support the Heartland Institute, you can help fight back against these loonies. So there you go.
The cost of those have been going up.
Keep us on the air tomorrow.
Figure out how to get some of these cost barriers out of the way. We've got to get better technologies like they're working on at Mississippi State to get Americans comfortable with the safety of nuclear, with the security of nuclear. But I think the facts and the technologies today are pretty compelling. Nuclear today is a little less than 20% of U.S. electricity. That's pretty significant. But we also have to remember electricity is just one sliver of energy. The biggest use of energy is high temperature process heat. And I would say it's the most important use of energy because it's how we make steel and cement and metals and all those things that we make everything else out of. We can't build an internet or a car or a factory without those materials. Nuclear could provide energy, could provide high temperature heat to really impact manufacturing as well. There's just so much room to run and to grow for nuclear energy. And I think we're going to see a broad investments across our country in the research and the enabling technologies. And hopefully before long, we're going to see the energy source deployed widely as well.
It is so refreshing to hear you say those things, and I so look forward to working with you.
You know, all these people are so interested in nuclear power. None of them are interested in why nuclear power has not been built in the United States over the last 40 years. I mean, just recently there's a couple, you know, reactors in Georgia, but it's because of, you know, the radiation scare and the junk science at EPA. And none of these people know anything about that. And I just find that disturbing. They care so much about nuclear power, but not what the problems are. And I don't mean to be, you know, bitter Betty about any of this, but it's just shocking to me that they don't know what the issues are for the energy they say they like.
No, and what
the industry is too as well.
And public perception on nuclear is changing, and that's great. But what you're going to see is really the laying of the foundation is these companies that want to build nuclear are going to say, well, it's just too expensive. And so the people, these elected officials can then offer them subsidies to do it.
But Jason, it's so expensive because of the EPA standards, which have no basis in science. And that's
well, the sad, you know, and the sad thing is, if we have a nuclear renaissance, whether it's next gen, whether it's modular plants, whether it's micro nukes, it's being driven by climate change, climate concerns. The renaissance being driven by that, not by the soundness of nuclear technology and nuclear power in and of itself.
A wildfire killed 102 people and destroyed the town of Lahaina on Maui.
Oh, Hirono. There we go.
Electric, which is a major utility company, received a $95
Oh no, I didn't know she was on this
award
committee.
from
Holy
the
moly.
DOE to help in rebuilding Maui's electric grid and reduce the risk of future wildfires. The state of Hawaii has also received other support. And
Did the
funding
Japanese
from,
drop
the
Hirono
DOE
on Pearl
to
Harbor?
with this kind of modernization. You acknowledge the need for improvements.
What a
to
disaster.
electric grids that will reduce
The real
risk
problem
of
with California's fires, with and her situation with Hawaii, is mismanagement, gross mismanagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now
Absolutely.
climate change is being used to excuse the fact that we have gross mismanagement.
Well,
in every case.
So the shocking thing, Donna, is what happened in Maui in August 23 is just what happened in Los Angeles 2025. And hardly anybody makes that connection. It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
Look, if it's not natural disasters, it's the collapse of police forces, it's inner cities being destroyed. Every major city run by Democrats is a hellhole.
For 60 years at least.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. The DOE is required to ensure that all construction and repair projects funded by the DOE under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act pay prevailing wages. Will you pay prevailing wages as required under the infrastructure law that I just mentioned?
Prevailing
Senator,
wages,
if I have
nothing
the
to do
privilege to be
whatever with
confirmed,
producing
I will
energy.
follow the laws and
You know,
statutes of the
they
United States.
always talk about prevailing wages, but then they create environmental policies that increase the cost of living expenses for every item you have. And so what it does is create more poverty. If you look at California and their progressive policies, they actually have a two-tier system. They have rich and poor, and it's masked because all of their environmental policies have stopped people from being able to buy a home because they created artificial scarcities. It's increased the cost of gasoline. I mean, California, no matter what you do, has at least $1 to $1.50 higher on gasoline prices. Electricity, they're paying twice as much. Right now, at least 30% of all California residents has a shutoff notice that whose house hasn't burned down.
Ask all those baristas and waiters and cooks who lost their jobs at fast food restaurants and regular restaurants in California, whether the prevailing wage, whether the big wage increase helped them out. in the end, if they're worried about wages, they should support oil and gas development and coal, because those are good paying jobs well above prevailing wages.
And they force those jobs out of the state,
Rigorous and
along with
ethical
manufacturing.
practices my whole life, Senator, and will continue to do exactly that at the Department of Energy if I have the privilege of being confirmed.
I only have a little bit of time, but I do want to get to this. If you are confirmed, your obligation will be to the American people, not to the shareholders or board members for an oil and gas company. Would you allow all exports of natural gas to China and anywhere else around the world, regardless of whether the exports would increase heating and power bills for the American people?
Senator, I'd love to have more time to talk about natural gas exports. The brief history of them is, as we've grown our natural gas exports, our price of natural gas has gone down because the industry, natural gas production industry, has
So
benefited
you're telling
from
me
scale.
that you would, I'm asking whether you would take into consideration what the impact for the cost of energy in America would be if you allow export of these oil and gas. So you would keep that uppermost in mind, right? With what the impact of these kinds of exports would be to the cost of energy to our American people.
Absolutely, Senator. I share
Thank
your
you.
concern there.
Okay, so another problem. So what we should be doing
Thank you,
is
Mr.
burning
Chair.
coal for electricity and exporting all the
Chris,
gas we can, because the Europeans and Asians will pay 6 times more for it than a U.S. utility. And you know, he hasn't thought this through.
But when we implement those technologies, the world follows. So that's actually the global.
As far as I know, China's not
How do
importing our
we
gas
actually
much.
bring
They
the
are.
folks
They do. They
along
buy
on
gas
that
from us.
where they're skeptical? Like
They don't have a lot of import terminals, I don't think.
Well, I don't. You know, they don't really produce any gas themselves. So to the extent they want gas, they have to buy it from someplace.
How do we convince them?
Right now, they're getting it from Russia.
Senator, thank you for the question. Thank you for your opening remarks as well. This is tough. I've spent my whole adult life engaged in dialogues about energy. When I went to MIT to work on fusion energy, I worked on solar energy at UC Berkeley. My whole thing is we want more energy in the world because it's what makes people's lives better. And you have to understand that there isn't dirty energy and clean energy. All energies are different, and they all have different trade-offs. Different people have different weights or evaluations of trade-offs. Different geographies or locations have climates more favorable to this energy versus that energy. So it's a complicated dialogue, which means it's not easy to get people to share this broader perspective on it. I think we're seeing a little bit of that in passionate, well-meaning, wonderful people that have been sitting in the hearing room today. But one of the things I've worked on is to try to just assemble the numbers and the data. And when I was born, the world got kind of a mid 80% of its total energy from hydrocarbons. And I was born, as we know, pretty much very close to 60 years ago. 60 years ago in a few hours right now. But today, total global primary energy is sort of low to mid 80%. So global demand for energy has grown a lot. We've brought a lot of new energy technologies along, thankfully, or we wouldn't have as much energy as we have today. But it's proven very hard to displace hydrocarbons in the global energy system. And I'll say one last thing, Senator, and turn it back to you. The other perspective I think that's important to look at is 1 billion people live lives like us. We get to wear fancy clothes made out of hydrocarbons. We get to use motorized transport and travel to visit our family, and we have warm houses in the winter, and we have cool houses in the summertime. But that's 1 billion people in the world. There's 7 billion people in the world that don't live lives anything like we do. And I've traveled to 55 countries. And one thing I know, those 7 billion people, they want this. They want what we have. And of course, they should get what we have. And through market forces and improvement and leadership, particularly leadership from the President-elect Trump, I think we're going to see growing more abundant energy resource coming out of our country and hopefully out of the world so that everyone else can live lives like we do.
And I think it's really important that you are a voice for that, because you'll have a platform to convince people and to explain what you just explained here. All different types of energies have strengths and weaknesses. But when we deploy these technologies, we lead the way. More energy, higher standard of living, and better environmental stewardship. And that's really what you're all about, rather than folks trying to say, well, we can't have this and we got to only have that. And so that's a big role for you to play. And following on that, you work on hydraulic fracturing and so forth. It was technically feasible, but it wasn't economically feasible, right? Same thing with other things like, as the president's talked about, clean coal technology. We've addressed SOx, NOx, mercury, and now CO2. Will you commit to working with us to address the carbon capture, the CO2 capture, not only to address CO2 concerns, but also
Here comes the grift. We got to get these subsidies out to do something to spur carbon capture, which is the greatest scam there is.
We went from helping the world, increasing prosperity, to adding costs to energy production through carbon capture for no good reason.
Yeah, inflationary subsidies to do absolutely nothing.
All in 10 seconds. I'm sorry.
My answer is a resounding yes.
Great. Thank you.
Ugh.
The oil industry,
safe industry,
for the
safe
audience who
answer.
isn't familiar with this topic, though, the oil industry loves carbon capture because they think that it's going to prevent them from being taken down by the climate people. Because a lot of these companies think that if they reduce their carbon dioxide emissions enough, that they'll be allowed to continue to exist, where that is not the case. These people, these Greens, they want them gone and dead no matter what. Even if their emissions were zero, they'd want them gone and dead. So it's a huge scam at this point.
Yeah, the oil industry also wants in on some of the green energy subsidies. You know,
it's a huge grift.
It's not that there's not millions of dollars flowing to these technologies that oil companies and want to be in on.
It's a huge grift. ExxonMobil can make plenty of money just selling oil and gas and chemicals. They don't need to do any of this, taxpayer theft, but they, it's free money, so they'll do it.
Yep. Yeah. It's the Winston Churchill definition of an appeaser as someone who feeds the crocodiles, hoping they'll be the last ones eaten. And does absolutely nothing.
Yeah, but they're really, Jason, I think they're really twisted. They don't do it because it's not public relations for them. I mean, they're doing it for the money. Because it's not public relations wise, it's not working for them. It never has.
Yeah, it's true. No, it never has, but it does allow them to virtue signal to some people. But you're right, they're chasing the subsidies just to add to their bottom lines and make us pay more for everything. All it is inflationary.
Bad government policies.
I don't think that people realize that everything we use uses fossil fuels. I mean, it's not just our heating, not just the gas in our cars. I mean, my clothes have fossil fuels made from a product of fossil fuels. My shoes, my glasses, my cell phone, the bottles of water we drink. Everything we have uses a derivative of fossil fuels. What do they think we're going to replace that with?
6,000
be more expensive.
More than 6,000 products. The phone, the computer we're sitting in front of watching this, the plastic around it. God, you want all those plastics in the hospital. I don't want glass bottles and tubes hooked up to me if I go to the hospital.
As Patrick Moore points out, if we didn't have fossil fuels, we'd all be dead. The vast majority of people on this planet would be dead. It'd be even worse than the pre-industrial period, because at least they knew how to they knew how to adapt. I mean, they had technology to survive without fossil fuels. We don't. We'd all be dead.
And there's the agenda right there, to get rid of all of us. Very Malthusian. I mean, Jane Goodall, when talking about the Amazon, said that
depopulation, but they don't say it.
It is. I mean, Jane Goodall, who was just given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, had talked about saving the rainforests in Amazon. Absolutely absurd, but said that we need to get to a population that we had back in the 1500s, which is a 95% reduction from today. I mean,
so Republicans need to talk about this. They need to expose this, but they don't. You get Chris Wright, and bless his heart for what he is, but He's just sitting there feeding into this myth of emissions. Yeah, climate is real. We need to do something. No, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
Evil
If
nonsense.
they want to learn more about I'm going to give a shameless plug to AmericanEnergy101.com, AmericanEnergy101.com. We've got some great videos on there that please go take a look at them, share them with your friends, publish them, get them out there to educate people about the products that we use in our daily lives and where they come from. But it's couple of great videos. We're rolling out a series there, and hopefully some policymakers will get a chance to watch those, and we'll try to get them in front of them and their staff.
To be fair to Wright, to some extent, this is kabuki theater, right? This is the same thing that happens with every Supreme Court justice. They have ruled, they have written, we know where they stand on an issue, and then they come before committees and say, oh, I have to withhold judgment and not say anything that might come before me. And Wright's doing the same thing because he wants to get the position.
If Sterling, if you were Trump's pick and you knew that you have 53 Republican senators behind you, I'm sure that, you would be a lot more forthcoming, and you would not say these things, right?
Well,
he doesn't need to throw these bones out there.
But I wouldn't, quite likely, I wouldn't get approved because I would be honest. And the truth is, you can't count on 53 Republicans. We know there are soft Republicans, and they're the ones on this committee. Some of the ones on this committee, they're saying, we've got to do carbon capture. Don't you agree with carbon capture? If he was to say, no, I don't. I think carbon capture is idiotic. He could say that.
You think, I find it hard to believe this nomination would go down if he said that. I don't even know how many Democrats he's going to get. I mean, he's like Satan for them, right? He's a fracker.
I agree.
Does it get any worse than that?
No, I agree that he's not going to get many, if any, Democrats, maybe Fetterman. But I'm not convinced that if he was honest about energy and climate, if he said, look, climate change is BS, I'm not convinced he wouldn't lose some Republican votes, and they can't afford it.
Well, maybe that would be a useful thing to happen. So I mean, we need to have these issues debated, and they're not. The climate will go on forever because Republicans will not just say it's a hoax. We don't need to do it. It's stupid. Trump, I'm sure they, when Trump used to talk about it in campaign rallies, they probably told him to shut up about it. I mean, to the extent you can.
I agree with you. I think that they should be honest about it because they're going to use this in the midterm. We really only have 18 months to get anything through. And any time that they say, wait a minute, but you agreed with us on climate change, is going to be the next TV ad to flip the house the other way.
Yeah, I mean, if I was right, I'd be talking about this California thing. I mean, the problem in California is not fossil fuels, not climate change. It's bad government, bad Democrat government.
And they've used environmentalism to do it. In California, because of the climate change policies that prevents really any new housing development, only 8%, I want you to get this, 8% of African Americans can afford a middle class home. 8% because of artificial scarcity. And it's all because of the climate change policy that you can have multiple lawsuits against one building project to stop it in the name of climate change. So people should look at it. The real goal is to lower people's standard of living so that people don't live as long.
No, that's absolutely right. And people are really brain damaged about this. I posted something yesterday about how California uses goats for brush control in Southern California. And obviously it's ridiculous. It's some quaint notion and they're cute and whatever. And I get all this blowback on my X feed. Oh, they really work. It's really good. Obviously they don't. Okay. California's having the worst wildfire ever with goat management. Okay. It's insane. We need to get these stupid ideas out of people's heads.
And they talk about, because it's a desert and it's hot. Look, Arizona is warmer. Arizona is hotter, and they don't have the wildfires that California has. And majority of the wildfires that get started is because of people And then it's because of mismanagement in their forests.
Yeah.
And they don't allow people, I lived in California. We knew that when it was getting hot, we would have to water our houses down. So in the case that it got too hot, then the fire wouldn't spread. They don't allow you to use water. You can't water your grass twice a day. You can't keep everything moist so the fires don't spread, like a bonfire.
Could you take a minute?
Yeah, no, it looks like, California, a lot of this damage could have been mitigated had like every house just had sort of almost like a hot tub full of water that could be sprayed on the house, an external sprinkler system. A lot of the stuff could have been, and that would be pretty cheap to do. It's how the Getty Museum survived, but they don't want to do it. Instead, they want to ban fossil fuels because they imagine that the Santa Ana winds won't come through. There won't be a spark, and there'll be nothing to burn. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the Santa Ana winds always come.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been coming.
And California's always had fuel. I mean, look, historically, California burned. It was the least populated region of the continental U.S. before Europeans got here and decided it was a nice place to live because you could ship water from the other states in the western United States to keep people living there and to green it up. It was an arid desert.
Yeah, over the weekend on my X feed, I posted this article from the Anaheim Gazette in October 1875. And they feared the combination of four things: brush, flammable buildings, what they called a useless fire department, and Santa Ana winds. Those four things in 1875. And 150 years later, we've learned nothing.
We have brush.
We have all
a fire department run by useless people.
Well, that doesn't work. Fire hydrants, there's no water.
Yeah, no water.
When that happens, there's going to be a stampede by countries to sign up to get SMRs and micros. And I, after talking with you, I'm convinced that that you agree that we need to be a leader, the leader in doing that. So thank you for your understanding in that regard, and look forward to working with you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Bresson.
Thanks so much. And first, I want to congratulate you, Senator Lee, on being chairman of the committee for your first hearing at the helm. And we're very grateful for your thoughtful leadership on these important hearings. We're getting underway, and tomorrow we have North Dakota Governor Burgum, who's here to testify as the nominee. And I assume we're going to hear another wonderful introduction by the great senator, former governor of North Dakota. Senator
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Wright, congratulations. We've had a chance to visit. I have a number of questions, but before, and I'm going to submit most of them for writing. There were some questions from the senior senator from California about wildfires, and you were abruptly cut off from trying to answer, and he apologized for cutting you off. But I would want to give you time to now respond, if you'd like to, for some of the comments that he had made that you weren't able to respond to.
Oh, as someone who has spent my life focused on poverty and poverty abatement in our country and abroad, seeing people suffering, seeing people in pain, seeing people lose family members, lose their property, lose their sense of self, lose their security is absolutely heart-wrenching. It's horrible to watch what's happening in LA today. And wow, these are the kind of things we want to protect people from. We want to make our society more resilient, stronger. There's no words to say in the middle of a personal trauma, that reflect global policy and all that. These are human tragedies that touch every one of us. I lived in California for 19 years, have lots of friends in the LA area. I probably get emotional talking about it. It's horrific to see what's happening there. We need to do everything we can to get those fires out, to get that infrastructure rebuilt, and to get people to return to the lives they had before it was visited on by these horrific fires.
I agree. It's heartbreaking, and I know we have our Wyoming National Guard there with equipment as well as manpower in trying to do that. I did what Senator Cortez Masto made a point about. Actually, it was your answer to Senator Cortez Masto mentioned that we've lost the capacity to enrich uranium, and America is dependent on imports right now to fuel our nuclear reactors. We have extremely limited commercial enrichment and conversion capacity, not in America's best interest. In 2023, Congress passed the Nuclear Fuel Security Act. We
repurposed $2.7 billion in funding to support this goal. If confirmed, will you make it a priority to build and secure our nuclear fuel supply chain?
Senator, absolutely. I know we shared that concern in our dialogue in your office. It is a significant hole in the U.S. arsenal right now, a technology we developed, but yet we import most of it from abroad, and most that's enriched in the U.S. is by companies that are not American companies in the U.S. Yes, we need to build American nuclear infrastructure on mining, on enrichment, on power production, and on waste disposal, which is a tough challenge.
Congress passed legislation to ban imports of Russian uranium in the United States. This law is intended to revive American uranium production, strengthen our nuclear fuel supply. It has to be implemented correctly. The Secretary of Energy has the discretion to provide waivers to companies seeking to import uranium from Russia. Do you agree these waivers should be very limited and used only in extreme circumstances?
Senator, I would agree with that assessment. It is very sad how dependent we have become on imported enriched uranium from Russia. That is a sad state of affairs where we are today. We need to get beyond that, but we need to get beyond that without shutting down the nuclear power plants we have running today. So it is an area that requires urgent action.
Because it does seem that as the shutdown in Russian uranium, now we see more imports from China. So the next issue is confirm, will you support efforts to end uranium imports from China as we continue to try to build the U.S. nuclear supply?
Yes, Senator, that is another country on which we should not be dependent upon for critical supplies. And of course, enriched uranium to turn on our lights and power our factories are critical supplies.
And then finally, with regard to advanced nuclear reactor and demonstration projects, Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program is meant to help developers overcome some of the hurdles that we have in terms of the expense early on. With the development, programs receive broad bipartisan support from this committee and across the Congress. So I look forward to getting the current projects over the finish line. Will you ensure the department continues to be a faithful partner in this mission?
Yes, Senator, I think that is a key role of the U.S. government and particularly of the Department of the Energy to help bridge these technologies that have lots of running room, but mostly for government regulatory burden and uncertainty have not been able to reach full commercial status yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
I just want to say here, the first nuclear power plant in the U.S. took 3 years from planning, from soup to nuts, planning to producing power to build. 3 years. We don't need demonstration projects. We just need to get these projects going, get them in the ground, and start producing power. I mean, this is crazy. 60 years ago, it took 3 years to do this.
And my suspicion that power plant ran for 50 years.
Probably.
They'll never allow mining in this country, not with those environmental over every aspect of anything that has to do with nuclear. They're not going to. They'll block it. And they don't like mining in this country. That's why China owns everything.
Now, what you need is fundamental NEPA reform. We got to get rid of NEPA. If you don't get rid of that, the lawsuits will tie up not just nuclear, every power plant, reliable baseload power plant that you want to get built, all the pipelines, it's all NEPA.
So I can't list off the 5 levers I can pull, but I have certainly been in dialogues and investigations about how do we make it easier to research, to invest, to build things. I think DOE has land and facilities that can be helpful in this regard. My current company, Liberty Energy, owns part of a small modular reactor company called Oklo, and their first small modular reactor is going to be built in the Idaho National Lab, a DOE facility. So is there an enabling role DOE can play to help launch nuclear energy? I think absolutely. I think it's both creative things like that. It's also research. It's also communication about the energy and the technology. Like, this should be a huge part of America's future energy source, but that won't happen without action within the legislature of the United States, with action from the Department of Energy and our incoming administration.
And Sterling, to your point, that first nuclear power plant lasted for 35 years.
What kind of legislation could we also be passing here?
From 1954 to 1989.
SMRs and other
there you go. Well,
energy.
shorter than I thought.
Absolutely.
enough.
The Advance Act that was passed not long
Longer
ago.
than any
I
wind
think was
turbine or
early
solar
on, and
panel
I think
built.
it's a great first step.
For sure.
But certainly more can be done.
Without subsidies.
So Arizona is actually
Without.
a state with ample renewable resources, sun, and a rapidly growing industrial sector. Since the passage of the IRA, Arizona has seen billions of dollars in new clean energy investments and created tens of thousands of really good paying jobs in some of our rural areas too. Some Republicans have started talking about dismantling and narrowing the energy provisions from the IRA, which in the end would not actually save money, and doing so would actually cost Arizona middle-class jobs, economic growth, and also
More
clean energy
grift.
production, which I think we all agree we want
Yeah.
as much energy production above, no matter what.
Inflation Reduction Act, taxpayer subsidized inflationary dollars, making your money worth less and less.
Ensure that previously
Act.
authorized
Yes.
IRA funds are efficiently distributed?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Look, I'm not involved in lawmaking. That'll be here in the body of the Senate and the House. My goal would be to implement the laws of the land and maybe make some decisions on allocation of capital or funds that are approved by congressional bodies. And I will seek to allocate those funds in the most efficient way to grow our supply of affordable, reliable, secure energy, and to invest in technologies that can't do that today, but have a clear pathway to do that in the future. That, I think, is a critical function of the DOE, from basic research to emerging technologies to technologies that have been born but are not at commercial scale yet. I think there's a critical role for the DOE in all of those things.
And now moving on from
fundamentally
generation
disagree.
now to transmission.
I've read the Constitution.
Really
It doesn't
difference
mention
between energy, can't
energy
move it,
or
right?
research
So I do
as
believe
a
that
role
more
of the
transmission
government.
construction will also be vital to meeting the energy demands in the coming years all over the country. And I voted repeatedly to streamline the permitting for transmission energy projects. What will your approach be to improving the timeline for transmission project approvals?
Oh, I've been a passionate advocate for making, as I said in my opening statement, to make it easier to build things in America. It'll always be hard. It involves communities and space and movement of materials, but we need to be able to build things in America. You can't build a next generation system if you can't build anything. I think President Trump campaigned aggressively on building things again in America, on growing American energy production, on securing our electricity grid and driving down the price. The only way you can drive down the price of a critical commodity is to grow the supply. So there's going to be many different avenues to pursue there. So I'm going to be learning. I'm learning from this committee in the most effective ways to do that. But I'm 100% committed to growing our electricity grid and our energy production and removing those barriers that are standing in the way of doing things in Arizona and across our country.
So does he know that Democrats want all these transmission lines for wind and solar?
I'm sure he does.
Then why say that? We need transmission lines that make sense.
Yeah.
For power that makes sense.
We can't build things in America if we don't have reliable energy, energy source. And that's not going to come from wind and solar.
The Democrats' plan is to industrialize the entire continental United States with wind turbines, with solar panels, and all the wires that they have fought for years because they say they're a cancer danger. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
From the entrepreneurial perspective, from the economics perspective to the security perspective, is truly extraordinarily unique.
I like
So the
David
fact
Snare.
that
He's
nominated to this
someone I
position,
respect,
we
but
have
I think he's just wrong.
go through this process.
It is diminished, maybe, but look, read the Constitution. What role was the federal government delegated to do national environmental policy? It's not there. The word environment doesn't appear. And I don't want the federal government doing it. Leave it to leave everything that's not delegated to the federal government to the states.
But your focus about
I agree.
affordability and abundance is so important to understand. So there's been a lot of passion that you've heard in the back of the room today, and you've had your back to it, but your ears and I think your heart is attuned to it. because there is so much emotion that to what they're saying with the changes in our climate today. And we can argue about the percentages or how much is human caused or whatever, but we are seeing that undeniably there is change. You are not denying that. You have said before this committee and in other places that climate change is real. Is that correct?
This is a Republican.
Absolutely,
Oh my God.
Senator.
Yeah.
And I heard you say this morning, and make sure I wrote this down correctly, that the solution to climate change is how we evolve our energy system. Is that a correct summation?
Absolutely, Senator.
So it's about technology. We're acknowledging, we're dealing with it, we're living it, we're feeling it. We're feeling it in Alaska right now.
Where is the Greg
Wrightstone
Wrightstone angel on his shoulder?
right now, as it is in Washington, D.C. this morning. But we're seeing changes that are detrimental.
Now that we've realized the Earth is rotating,
out of whack. And we want to have.
let's move on to the hearing.
Oh my God.
One of the ways that we know we're going to
It's rotating and we feel bad about it.
our
We must stop. the
We have
rotation of the
empathy.
Earth.
We must have empathy with the earth and it's crying
So I want to
through our destruction from climate change.
this morning more to the parochial side. When we're talking about Arctic, we don't necessarily have the national labs, although we do have a great partnership with NREL, with our cold climate housing. We're very, very proud about that. But where do you think the Arctic Energy Office, the Office of Indian Energy, and NREL's Alaska campus fit into your thinking when you're thinking about not only the technologies, but how you can use a place like Alaska as a proving ground for so many of these technologies where our energy costs are higher than just about any other place in the United States of America and arguably in parts of the world?
Senator, thanks for the question, and thanks for the fabulous dialogue we had in your office. That was so broad-ranging. And as I think we discussed there, I view Alaska as a microcosm for the world. Now, it's hard to call Alaska micro, but here you are, a state with just enormous energy resources set right next door to remote communities with very little energy access, and the energy access they do have is expensive. You know, this is the combination of resources, lack of infrastructure, different settings need different energy sources. I have worked for years.
It's right there next to the 51st
state. Behind
state.
me is the gal who runs our Bettering Human Lives Foundation, trying to bring
You know,
access to remote
Alaska,
communities.
this is kind of
when I hear
crazy.
of your Arctic
Alaska in the summertime has 24 hours of light. In the wintertime, has 24 hours of dark. Exactly when are these solar panels and windmills going to be working for them? Are we going to just destroy that population every year? I mean, this is so unreliable.
Get the honor to be,
and they don't have, you know, it's already difficult to just move people in and out of Alaska in the wintertime. And you think that somehow we're going to build a transmission system that's going to bring energy using solar and wind into the area? That's the most unreliable type of energy for climate like that. I mean, these things only work in not even a best case scenario in places like California where it's sunshine almost 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's sort of they work.
Yeah.
I want to address this comment by Chris here, who says the best defense against climate change, assuming it's a problem, is getting wealthy, surely. And I think that's the point that Wright is getting to with his kind of affirmation of some as misleading and as unfortunate as his his phrasing is. I think that's the point that he's like kind of slyly getting at with his climate comments, is that, like, oh, sure, climate change, but the solution isn't to ban fossil fuels. The solution is to use them to their best, in their best use case. I think that's what he's getting at with it. And it's going right over a lot of these senators' heads, but yeah. And I also want to bring up.
But I think it just, this whole dialogue just reinforces all these bad ideas, especially among Republicans. I mean, we've got to talk about reality. What climate change are they talking about? Even asking wealth as a protection against, what climate change is anyone talking about?
And you really have to look at the state of California as the model. California has the highest poverty rate when you adjust it for cost of living expenses in the country. It's number one in poverty.
Donna, I'm so glad you point that out. There's a lawsuit in California. It's called the 200, which are 200 civil rights organizations, people that don't necessarily ideologically align with me. But they are suing the state of California, saying that their policies violate the Civil Rights Act, that they have a disparate impact on communities of colors, and they're essentially suing CARB, the California Air Resources Board, because of what the policies they're implementing. And you talked earlier about electricity, people getting disconnect notices. In 2023 alone, there were 215,000 people who had their electricity disconnected. That's not including all the people that got disconnect notices because some people were able to pay their bill or they were able to get credit card debt. You know, they were able to finance it some way or another and keep the lights on. They didn't even get the disconnect notices, but 215,000 connections did. That could be upwards of 1 million people. And by the end of the year 2023, 40,000 connections were not reconnected. And those people are at the greatest risk of homelessness. And the climate is extremely dangerous when you are homeless because having a home and having a place to sleep, that shelter and food, and be able to refrigerate food and medicine is life-changing. And Chris recognizes that. Talking earlier in some of his opening remarks about 7 billion people on the planet want to live like we do. And the key to them being able to live like we do is access to affordable and reliable energy that he's talked about in his remarks, something that people in California increasingly are not getting to experience because of their so-called climate pandering policies. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, he doesn't have to pander at all. Nobody voted for Trump for, I mean, people voted for Trump despite him saying climate is a hoax. People don't care. No one cares. And
regardless of climate change, weather is going to happen. Natural disasters will come. And the difference between what happens in Indonesia or some of these small island nations and some of these less developed countries and what happens in the United States is not the severity of the event.
Right.
Hurricanes aren't less worse when they strike here than they are when monsoons strike in Indonesia. Earthquakes aren't less worse here than they are when they strike in Afghanistan. The difference is wealth and development. There's a reason why hundreds of thousands of people might die when a monsoon and the tidal waves come in Malaysia or something. And the very worst situation with mismanagement in New Orleans, 2,000 people. And usually it's, dozens maybe die as opposed to hundreds or thousands in other countries. The difference isn't the storm itself. The difference is development and wealth.
Absolutely. In California, they've actually used environmental policies to keep minorities and low-income individuals poor. That's what they've used it for.
Yeah.
You need to look at that and just say, yes, I believe in that legal framework. It's the process. That's where people get into trouble because somebody else tries to redefine the agreement that's been made. Or let's just make it simpler. They try to redefine what is the waste, and then they try to reclassify very hazardous waste into something else, and then just say we're just going to leave it in the tanks or grounds which are leaking, and we don't want those leaky tanks and those sources of very severe issues. Okay. Secondly, do you believe in upholding investments in our capabilities in our national labs, particularly when it comes to the issue of AI and quantum? I think you and I had a chance to have this conversation. We think both of these things have major implications, but we have to have our labs continuing to play a leadership role with the right amount of funding to continue a very important competitive and national security agenda for our nation.
I agree very much with your comment and your question, Senator. And PNNL has done fabulous work in this area. Cybersecurity is a growing threat. It's not obvious to all Americans because we don't see it, but it's the infiltration into our systems across our government and our industry from foreign actors is huge. And driving that research forward is critical for the security of our country, economic and geopolitical security of our country.
Great. I know you know a lot about fusion. Do you think it's time that we look at fusion and let's just say the Tri-Cities is doing everything, okay? So they're very much a hub for a lot of different energy innovation because of both the long history of the Hanford cleanup and the national lab footprint and a lot of just natural resource issues. But do you think when it comes to fusion that we ought to be more aggressive of thinking about, in case this does become a reality, supply chain and grid integration? Do you think that would behoove us as a nation to be faster at our deployment of such technology if we knew what those supply chain issues were now and identifying them and identifying what a faster process for getting something like that
We
integrated?
don't have
into
any
the grid
fusion
would look like?
technology. What is she talking about?
Yes, yes, Senator. This is an exciting new technology with, again, just huge room to run, and it's moved very rapidly. The last decade has seen more progress than in my lifetime. And
An exciting, non-existent technology.
There's been no
to commercial
successful
power in the next decade.
actual fusion experiment. There's no technology.
Nanoseconds at great cost.
Power grid and
Yeah, but that's not real fusion. I mean, real
No, that's
fusion.
right. No, you're right.
No,
It's
what
a
are they
non-existent
talking about?
technology.
What is he talking about?
Grid resiliency, as I've talked throughout this hearing, is critical. It's the most urgent energy issue we have today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we're going to turn to another one of our new members who comes from.
While we're taking a quick break here, the President
with,
Donald
oil
Trump
refineries.
just put out on Truth Social this statement that says windmills are an economic and environmental disaster. I don't want even one built during my administration. The thousands of
Trump.
dead and broken
Yeah, thank
ones
you.
should be ripped down ASAP. Most
So-
expensive energy, only work with massive government subsidies, which will no longer pay. Which
So
we
is
will
he-
no longer pay. This is great.
Is he real-time trolling, right?
Right? Good to
No, I don't know if he is or not. I don't think so. But he features. There's a video that's in the Truth Social post that features Megan Lapp with Seafreeze Shoreside, which is a company that's suing the Department of Energy for their ignoring the environmental impacts of the coastal wind farms that they're planning all along the northeastern coastal fishing grounds, which are primarily fished for squid. So that's some of my previous work at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, visited with Megan and Bonnie, a couple of ladies who are really leading the charge up in the Northeast against these coastal wind, climate and industrial complexes.
Well, of course, many of ourselves, Heartland, and our allies are involved in lawsuits to block these things.
Yeah.
Have the Marc Hook terminal for
Hopefully this is a good sign here moving forward that we're going to save the environment of the coastal fishing lanes and our economic and prosperity and our national security by getting rid of these.
Yes.
We will save the whales once again.
Power for data centers and tech clusters in
Yeah,
Pennsylvania.
fossil
we've seen
fuels
recently an
saves the
innovative
whales
approach
once
with
again.
Microsoft, arrangement with 3 Mile Island. You and I spoke when we were together about the potential for Pennsylvania to become really a leader with energy and AI going hand in hand. And so as we discussed our meeting, I'm putting together a Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit later this year to bring together the energy sector, leading AI companies, huge sources of capital, global investors to deliver on President Trump's vision to unleash American energy and technological leadership. And so I'm looking forward to working with you and Secretary Burgum on that. Can I count on your support?
We had a great dialogue about that, Senator, and absolutely you can count on my support. It's a great way to frame this issue. We want to build a new American industry in artificial intelligence, and we want to lead the world in that industry. And boy, for our economic and national security, we better. You can't build any new industry without the energy to support it. So you have this vision that's a great coming together of a new manufacturing industry to manufacture intelligence and use the energy resources you have in Pennsylvania and attract the private investment capital to make it happen. I'm all in on that.
Thank you. Finally, we have a major opportunity in Pennsylvania to leverage our natural gas resources and carbon capture and storage technologies to produce blue hydrogen.
Oh my God.
Will
Oh
the
my
Trump
God.
administration, with your leadership, ensure that federal
Cost
support for the
benefit
hydrogen
analysis.
development does
I
not
dare you to
disadvantage
do a cost benefit analysis. There's no benefit. It's all cost.
Senator,
Yeah.
I know of what.
Where
you
have we
said.
gone wrong, Jason?
Too early
No.
for me to speak about trade-offs between different technologies and all that stuff. Any commitments there? I will say again that the president, who I hope to be honored to serve, is very passionate
Yeah, if I'm
about
from
energy.
Pennsylvania, I'm
growing
going to
energy,
be like,
growing American
we need to
production
get
of
the
energy.
coal industry going.
And
It's
not just for
productive,
energy itself, but to
creates
enable
value,
better
creates
lives for
jobs. Carbon
Americans,
capture does
stronger
nothing.
power, economic and political security. for
How
all
hard is
countries.
that to understand?
Everything part of that mission, I think you'll see this administration support.
Great. And finally, the Office of Fossil Energy has a storied history of driving innovations in the industry, including contributions to the shale revolution. One of the major labs is in Pittsburgh. How can we, as you take leadership, if confirmed at the helm here, revitalize this office to focus on the next generation of fossil fuel innovations?
Yes, again, fossil fuels, again, who've powered the world throughout all of my lifetime and will continue to do so, is somehow fallen out of fashion and out of favor. So even though it's a critical technology for us, there's been less interest to invest in it, less interest to talk about it. I don't share those aversions. I'm all about new technology to improve energy sources across the board, of course, including hydrocarbon energy sources as well.
One of the things the senator from Alaska said, which I'm excited about too, is you're an innovator, you're a scientist. One of the consistent trends we've seen over the past decades is the reduction in carbon emissions as a consequence of technological innovation. So by developing these innovations, we have more national security, we have greater economic growth in places like Pennsylvania, and we have a cleaner environment. What energy innovations are you most excited about, given the trends that you're seeing?
Oh, there's so many. But as you're talking there about natural gas in Pennsylvania, it's been the biggest driver of reducing America's greenhouse gas emissions. On a per capita basis, they were lower last year than any year since I was born. Like, think about that. This isn't a recent trend. This is any year since I was born, and everyone knows my age now. So I'm not going to say it, but everyone knows it since it's my birthday. But thank you, Senator.
Oh, you're going to end on a happy birthday. Thank you. Thank you.
Senator King.
You picked a hell of a way to spend your birthday. Mr. Wright, I think your position on climate change is more subtle than is publicly recognized. As I understand it, you don't deny that there is climate change happening in the world and that things like sea level rise and warming are occurring and that they're related to the combustion of fossil fuels, which has drastically increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Senator. I enjoyed our dialogue about that and future dialogues about that. I've been outspoken about this for probably at least 20 years.
The camel's nose, his full head, and his shoulder
of hydrocarbons.
under the tent.
Has he not talked to Donald Trump? Does he not know who Donald Trump is?
Absorbs infrared radiation.
Let's see how he explains this.
I understand your position is, as I say, more subtle. You see a tension between diminishing our reliance on fossil fuels and powering those 6 million people who don't have adequate energy sources today. That's the kind of balance that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, well stated, Senator. That is my view. Energy is critical to human lives. Climate change is a global challenge that we need to solve, and the trade-offs between those two are the decisions politicians make, and they're the decisions that'll impact the future of our world and the quality of life.
Those trade-offs are critically important. I think there are two observations. One is you said there's no energy transition.
Wrightstone needs to get him on the phone, like now.
Oh my God.
Your work in shale was an energy revolution in this country that transitioned us in many ways toward natural gas. So there is possible transition. It can happen either.
We need another protester in there ASAP.
Yeah. Fusion,
This down.
battery storage, all of those technologies. And I note that your company
We need some pro-fossil fuel protesters. Is what we
also
need.
has investments in Battery
Sorry, it wasn't in
technology-
my budget to get people, a bunch of little carbon princes in there saying they live the high carbon lifestyle. Embrace the high carbon lifestyle.
finish where we can.
I had no idea it would be necessary.
Mission intensity
Yeah.
of our manufacture of energy.
Absolutely, Senator. You're bringing me back to the great dialogue we had about energy, about climate change, about trade-offs, and I appreciate very much your comments today. I am for improving all energy technologies that can better human lives and reduce emissions. They go together.
I would add one note, however, and I understand the tension, and I think that's a reasonable. I remember saying years ago, we can't
I'm
tell.
glad you're laughing,
Indian
Steve, and not having an
nation
aneurysm.
They
That-
can't
that's
have air
good
conditioning.
news.
I'm just trying to think, like, we'll just have to start over after today and see what happens, right? Just erase this from memory.
What if we're wrong and something really drastic happens? My
And
concern
these
is
things
that
usually
that's
do
very
go
much
south like this.
on the Atlantic
Yeah.
current.
I mean, climate change is being used to destroy the middle class. No other way to put it.
So I think we need to bear in mind.
Yep,
that
it's the most effective way to implement socialism.
And he just lacks the courage. He just lacks the courage of his convictions. I mean, he doesn't need this job. There's no point in having this job. It's not a useful department. I endorsed him because
I agree with that comment as well.
of his sensible statements on climate. But now we should just abolish this department and him too.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's in a difficult political situation, trying to get confirmed. But I'm optimistic he's
But it's
going to
not-
be
Jason,
the
it's not
champion
that
that we
important.
need in the cabinet.
Yes, it's just not that important to sell yourself like this.
Well, he's got, and I don't understand the process for confirmation, but I would imagine he's got to advance through this committee before a
Well, he
full vote
does,
of the
but he's
Senate.
got the Republicans. He's got the Republicans.
Oh, but he could
I
lose
think he's gonna
Murkowski.
fly. He's gonna fly through this one.
Yeah,
Like they already called him secretary.
Yeah,
If Pete Hegseth has, if Trump can twist arms for Pete Hegseth, then this guy would just sail through.
Yeah.
You don't have to prostitute yourself like this.
Your office,
Yeah.
your department. Will
The problem is he going to be consistent in what he does with what he's saying right now? Because that's scary to me.
Absolutely true, Senator. Nothing is more important than the supply, the affordability and the access to energy to Americans in America. So absolutely, that's a critical factor in that determination.
And one other question a couple of others I want to underline. Improving the energy structure of this country includes improved transmission. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's one of our major bottlenecks today.
That's just code for
And one of
wind
the
and
things
solar.
I hope you will continue research on is what are called GETs, grid enhancing technologies, which are you don't have to build a whole new tower. You can reconductor. There are technologies to
This is Bill
improve
Gates
the throughput
technology.
of our grid.
Great.
That I think is a direction we should move in. I commend the research on that to your department.
Thank you. And I agree with that comment as well, Senator. Actually, it was a dinner discussion last night.
I agree with everything, just
appreciate
as
your
long as you
testimony here
confirm me.
today, and look forward to working with you. This is a critical area. You bring a unique perspective and breadth of knowledge, and I appreciate your willingness to take on this challenge. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Which means you agree with everything I'm
Senator
saying.
Gaines. Chris, good to
Is
have
this
you
over
here.
yet?
I think it's the best view here to see your family, see Liz and
Are they
grandbaby
gonna do
there
live?
for a while.
I just want to add, as you know, I worked on the Senate Environment Public Works Committee. I've been watching this whole thing, and I just thought maybe naively, it's 2025. We're at a point where these nominees can come out and just say the truth and not pander like this, like we're seeing this. It's a shame. I don't know what else to say. As Steve's saying, he has the votes. It's not an issue. Why not be up there and be strong and lecture? Should be lecturing Murkowski on what's going on in Alaska, on how the permafrost was melting in the 1930s and 40s. He should have had art. There's no reason not to just push back gently, but not capitulate like this. So it's a shame. And, I hate to say this, but Lee Zeldin will be the same tomorrow in terms of his view on climate. And of course, if they ever ask his Interior Secretary Burgum, it'll be much further along than this. So this is the highest skeptic we have. You know who might be a bigger skeptic, and I'll shut up, is Sean Duffy at Department of Transportation. I would be surprised if he goes down this path. He might be the strongest one facing the Congress.
As our secretary. of energy.
If you guys think this is bad, wait till we get to Zeldin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I hate
It'll be a
to
hard day
Or
tomorrow.
Bergam is going to be just pain and
So-
suffering.
So the biggest fight we have really is with our own person.
Well, yeah, and he said the word solve climate change. I mean, it's just all the I don't. You know, I went to American Petroleum Institute yesterday. No mention of the word climate. They're all in on not repealing the Inflation Reduction Act. The American Petroleum Institute actually said yesterday that they were looking for surgical repeals of it, not the wholesale repeal.
Of
They've already got the
course not.
farmers lobby
They
turned
love
against
the money
repeal.
they've got.
They got the
They-
farmers
they-
lobby. Go ahead, sorry.
No. API is not our guy on this stuff.
No, but I'm just
They-
saying this is what, you know, big oil and big gas and all these companies, this is what they think. They want a seat at the table, and typically a seat at the table is federal subsidies.
I've spoken to Chris Wright personally before. We've run into each other at events for petroleum related stuff. And when we talked, it was way more explicit about his positions on a lot of this stuff. It was not so accommodating of the narrative as he has been during this hearing. And he spoke, you know, pretty aggressively against a lot of the stuff that he's saying now. So I don't know. It's kind of surprising.
I'll say this. You look back at Trump's first term, the only candidate who took Trump's anti-Washington view, in other words, who took all the expert opinion and did the opposite, was Scott Pruitt at EPA. That's it. That I can think of at the moment. I can't think of any other cabinet level member that just said, yeah, the hell with pandering to the Washington consensus that they want me to say. And I don't think there may be, you know, again, I'm holding out hope for Sean Duffy, and I do have hope for Pete Hegseth on these issues. He actually yesterday, Pete Hegseth, during his hearing process, said anyone should be fired if they're advocating a solar navy or you know, sustainable fuel and all that stuff. So those are two bright spots. In terms of, doesn't mean that this doesn't take away from his from Chris Wright's job as energy secretary as being what it is, but it just takes away, like, why couldn't he be a moral and narrative and scientific leader on this issue and energy and push back against this vapid nonsense? Especially Murkowski was on the committee when I was there with Senator Inhofe. This is back when Obama was doing cap and trade, the tail end of the Bush administration. And it's great to see her come out of her shell. She was always cagey back then. You knew she wasn't with us. You knew she was a global, but she had to play politics. Now she's just full out all climate alarmist.
No, that's right, Mark. And this was an opportunity for Chris just to lay down the law on climate before all these Republicans. They're going to vote for him anyway. Why not just be honest? But he couldn't do it. And I'm terribly disappointed.
So are we back to 2016 where Donald Trump's narrative coattails, his framing of issues, literally stop with him? I hope not. I just can't stand. Well, and this is what happens in Washington. They care about their future jobs. They care about how they're seen. They care about what law firm. I'm not saying that's true of Chris Wright, but he's getting advice from the people who do all that stuff.
Yeah, this has been to your point. I realize that Trump has appointed loyalists versus like experts, and my hope was that by appointing loyalists, they're going to implement his agenda, not their agenda. So Chris is an example where, you know, he's not like he didn't get the job because he's a loyalist. He got the job because I think, like, it's the same reason Trump put Rex Tillerson at state. And so I'm kind of worried about this now.
Let's say this real clear, since you mentioned Rex Tillerson. Worst Donald Trump nominee in first term ever. One of his first actions was to go to the Arctic, sign the UN climate declaration on the Inuit people. He supported carbon taxes. He supported staying in the UN Paris Agreement. This was Donald Trump's first pick as Secretary of State. All right, we got to stop this bashing here. I got to control myself. Sorry about that. Everything's great. I'm sorry. It's all wonderful. I didn't mean to go.
No. Again, we have to worry about our own guy.
Yeah.
Where is the Greg Wrightstone angel on his shoulder?
Yes.
Greg, where is that?
Hey, I'm taken by surprise. I never thought we'd hear this out of Chris. You're right. He should have just stepped up and told the truth. Linnea, you've talked to him. I mean, I've talked to him, and it's just not.
And you know what? If you don't get the job, you just go back to your billionaire life. Who cares?
You know, it could be that people are telling them in order for the energy department career bureaucrats to work with you, you've got to cross the aisle. And, you know, that could be what's happening here, the advice. But
They're not going to work with him.
I know that, but that's
he's
to be what
coming in, you know, and knowing that everybody is his enemy, and he needs to go in there and crack the whip. Bottom line, it's the reason why he's away with so much stuff is they're not afraid of us, and it's about time we make them afraid of us.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to we don't need the energy department at all. Chris Wright, whoever. What's the difference?
This to me is the whole problem right now in Washington. Is I really thought with Trump winning, despite all the odds and not moderating his tone, that we could have people just stand up and be proud and say what they think and let the chips fall. But Chris Wright's proven that they can't do it. Now, we don't expect Burgum to do that. Burgum is all in on net zero, but he believes in carbon capture, but he's going to follow Trump's agenda.
Yeah.
And of course, Zeldin, I won't bring it up too much, but there's a video of him and you can watch where he's actually capitulating to the climate. This is back in 2017, so hopefully he's changed, but he's capitulating as a Republican climate solutions guy. So, you know, it's up to us to make it more comfortable for them. But I just think Washington is so strong. I will throw this in: Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, the whole Doge thing. Talk to David Stockman. Ronald Reagan tried this to a lesser extent. Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton probably succeeded where all others failed in terms of balancing the budget. Of course, they used a lot of the leftover, the Social Security Trust Fund, but we had balanced budgets. I just think that this is going to be the most challenging 6 months. And if they need to get everything right in the first 6 months, or this is going to be a Ronald Reagan, you know, domestic policy where by 1982, his entire tax cuts were done, domestic policy cuts were done, and he sort of drifted for 6 years.
Right, Mark, you're right. They have to do everything in the first 6 months. 1 bill, 2 bills.
Yes.
I mean, they just got it.
And narrative is so important.
Not gonna, narrative is so important, right?
You guys want to listen to see? Tom Cotton has been talking to him. I wonder what he was asking him about. Maybe
to be confirmed and serve in this role, I will quickly learn a lot more about the problem, including working with the team there and across the administration to find solutions to this critical problem you've identified. I agree with you about the gravity of the threat and the need to address it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll just say that in our experience, many of the personnel at the labs are brilliant scientists who go on to become managers, but oftentimes they have a purely scientific mindset, and they have it in their minds that they collaborate openly with fellow scientists from around the world, which may be fine if we're dealing with French scientists or Japanese scientists, but I'd say it's not the case with Chinese and Russian scientists. I'd also point out that the equivalent kinds of sites in China and Russia are not nearly so open to American scientists, and that would violate President Trump's treasured principle of reciprocity with foreign nations. Finally, another key responsibility of the Department of Energy that is sometimes overlooked is the National Nuclear Security Administration. It actually constitutes almost 50% of the department's budget. Can you give us assurances that you'll advocate that the NNSA receives adequate resources to complete this top priority mission for our national security?
Absolutely, Senator. I have significant concerns in that area. You know, our uranium enrichment capabilities in the United States have been denuded over the last few decades. Even our ability to produce plutonium pits has collapsed to nearly nothing. There's some efforts in place to reverse that, but I want to make sure they move as fast and expeditiously as possible. That is the ultimate guarantor of the sovereignty of our nation, is our nuclear arsenal. That is not something we can cut corners on and not worry about.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate, again, your testimony and your answers on these critical questions that are not always highlighted when you think about the Department of Energy, but they cross into our work on the Armed Services Committee and on the Intelligence Committee, where we'll see you in the future as well, in addition to vital energy development questions like this macro formation. So thank you very much for your testimony. Congratulations again. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Senator, particularly for working 2 hearings at the same time.
The nuclear security portion should all be moved to the Department of Defense, and then the labs should be closed and the DOE should be closed. We live without it for 150, 170 years or more. And our energy security was better before it than it has been after it.
Do we
Yeah,
know
you might need some of the labs for nuclear weapons research, but that should all be moved over to DOD and close the energy department.
Yeah.
Well, if Chris Wright has gone this way, what's that tell? It's a bad harbinger of things to come for the rest. Zeldin, Burgum, all the rest. I mean, this is not good.
No, it's like they forgot who nominated them, and they've never listened to him. And what would Donald Trump think about all this?
Protections, of course, built into the statute.
Protections
that were designed to ensure that things wouldn't get too expensive and that quality didn't fall off the table in connection with them. But in contrast to the previous Trump administration, the Biden administration has run somewhat roughshod over some of those consumer protections built into the law. This effort was, of course, in service of the Biden administration's whole of government focus on reducing greenhouse gas
The
emissions.
appliance stuff's important.
Sometimes to the exclusion of authorized statutory mandates. What will you do to ensure that maximum protections for American families and consumers will be recognized and respected if you're confirmed as Energy Secretary when implementing the Appliance Standards Program?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for that question and for raising that concern. I can assure you that concern is on the mind of millions of Americans across the country. I hear it very often. We want to drive, and the Department of Energy and the government wants to drive innovation and more efficient technologies, meaning delivering the same end with less inputs. That's advancement, that's technology. But to take clothes dryers, for example, it takes heat and it takes airflow, and both of those take energy. And I look at some new appliances today, and they use half the energy per minute, but if it takes an hour to dry your clothes instead of 30 minutes to dry your clothes, it's the same energy consumption, and you lost a half an hour.
Why is he bringing engineering and math into this question? This is about emotion, isn't it?
It does a lot.
Well, the reality here is that we've been doing this energy efficiency stuff since the 1970s, and none of it has paid off. We're not using less energy. We may be using it more efficiently, but it's cost a lot more money. And there's no there. Energy efficiency is another one of these things like the environment. It just sounds nice, sounds like we should be doing it, but the economic reality is it's just not there.
Of American consumers.
That is a fair point, especially when you're dealing with administratively promulgated rules that themselves have the effect of generally applicable federal law. They're enforceable as such. If they're not complied with, they can result in massive fines. They can result in somebody's business getting shut down. They can, even in some cases, with some administratively promulgated regulations, result in prison time if you fail to abide by them. And so that's all the more important. Anytime you're taking away consumer choice, that's of concern. Anytime you're making new law outside the people's elected lawmaking branch, that's also concern.
To answer the question on the screen, yes, I think this is just a bit of formality as
got,
our hearings regarding legislation.
A number of
You've done your work. You've got the votes before you go into the hearing.
Yeah, but it's really bad theater is the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
It is bad theater. It's offensive theater.
Yeah,
What I evidently I was muted. The other reality is that the government has no role in telling people what features their appliances should have, how much energy they use, so long as they're willing to pay for the energy. It comes down to this: there are plenty of energy efficient appliances on the market, and wealthy people buy them, but poor people can buy appliances that work actually better than some of the energy efficient appliances. My old dishwasher, I wash dishes in 30 minutes to an hour. My new one, the standard is 3 hours to wash dishes. That's efficient? No, it may use less energy, but that's not efficient for my time. And if I cared about efficiency, that would be my business. It's not the government's business.
Well, look, we shouldn't even be worried about this. I mean, we are awash in energy. We are just awash. There's no reason to focus on saving energy. None of these things ever pay off.
Murkowski said Alaska is being hit by global warming. That's the reason. That's literally the reason. That's what they would argue. And he's not pushing back on that.
At a safe temperature. That indoor air pollution.
My aunt.
Here we go with indoor air pollution.
Indoor air pollution. Oh my God.
Oh, good. We're going to talk about the subways in New York and how the air quality in the subways in New York.
I think his point about indoor air pollution is with like wood and dung burning.
More than doubled oil production, nearly doubled natural gas.
What does the DOE?
I assure you, he has no idea what he's talking about at this point.
Well, I'm pretty certain that there's no portfolio in the DOE to be concerned about indoor air pollution.
No, there's not. Not even an EPA.
Lives longer, healthier, and more opportunity rich. A lot to be proud of in this country, but there's so many other energy challenges out there that are little known and therefore
ultimately
not addressed.
Someone like Chris Wright, CEO of an energy company, he wants to be liked by all sides. He's working in industry, he's working with lobbyists, he's working with regulators. This is just his approach probably to life. So maybe we're being just a little too hard on him. This is theater, and this is his interpretation of the great art, and this is how he's presenting himself.
But he was
you're right,
he was
Marc,
bold.
But when the policies start coming out from Trump, he's going to look bad because he's given lip service to all this nonsense, which he should be batting aside, right? Because they're going to hold all this against him. I mean, I don't really care because Trump is going to be calling the shots, but it's just not good.
He wasn't scared to take a stand and speak out against ESG.
Trump calls the shots, but not all the time and not really.
What he can't do is he can't follow up and make it happen.
Yes, I was about to say, just in case the audience doesn't remember, Will Happer left New Jersey, over 80 years old, came to Washington to sacrifice as Trump science advisor for the explicit purpose of the red team, blue team, and the climate committee and the whole pushback against the UN. And it was approved by Trump. But a certain Fox Business host who will remain nameless killed it and brags about it publicly at CFACT that he killed it. And then he even said that Will Happer was an extreme guy. And that's why Donald Trump actually turned to Will Happer and said, I thought I approved that. But no, we'll do it after the election. They slow walked it. So even when Trump, so my point being is Trump can't be everywhere all the time. And, obviously on wind, he's going to follow his orders. And
that's why this is. That's why this is important. I mean, he's caving now. He's going to cave later. They always do.
Yeah, that's Washington. That's what when you look back, Donald Trump's first term, as far as I'm aware, only one cabinet member supported him pulling out of UN Paris. It was Scott Pruitt. I don't think anyone else in his administration did. Am I wrong on that? I could be wrong. There may have been some other cabinet member, but I don't think
including the former CEO of Exxon, right?
Yes, including Rick Perry, the Texas governor.
Yeah, there you go.
No, Steve Bannon and Pruitt banded together and got us out. So.
Right, but I'm just saying Bannon wasn't a cabinet member, but yeah, you're right.
No, but
I want to agree with the Democrats. Happer is extreme. He's extremely qualified to talk about physics, and he's extremely dedicated to the pursuit of truth and through science.
Well, who said that was a Republican, not a Democrat. And
well, there you go.
There's a top Trump advisor who killed that climate thing because he didn't want to deal with it and left Will Happer hanging like that. And I don't think I don't know if Will's coming back, but but that's the importance of narrative, because if we could have a pushback to all that, this is a unique opportunity in history, whether it's free speech, whether it's anti-wokeism against the transgender, critical race, and the climate. And I just feel like we're handing away a potential for a decisive victory today, right now, with Chris Wright's hearing. He's not challenging the narrative. How much more votes do you need? It's like the old joke, how many Republican presidents did it take to overturn Roe v. Wade? I don't know. It took 40, how many years is that? 50 years. And it wasn't until Donald Trump that it actually finally happened. They never can take the victory. They can never push it after the win. They end up capitulating.
All right, let me try to put some positivity back into this stream, because I think you guys sometimes are too close to DC. I think I'm cynical, but I live in Chicago, so I don't have the DC cynicism, going through my veins and drinking into my coffee. Are we going to have, compared to right now, is this administration going to pull down every barrier that it legally can to exploring and extracting energy? Yes. Is it going to be putting up barriers to those sorts of things? No. Are they going to move for the goal that Trump has, drill, baby, drill, and if they could, as fast as possible, make the United States the leader on the globe in energy exploration and extraction? Yes. So when you think about it that way, what he's saying here is disappointing from our perspective, because we live and breathe these issues very much. But the bottom line is that the policies are going to be 180 degrees different than they are now, and that's good for America in so many ways. It's hard to.
Well, okay, that's true, Jim. But I tell you what, to defend those policies, to successfully defend those policies, you've got our sort of thinking has to prevail. Okay, we've got to talk about this honestly, because there's going to be a lot of rules that are going to need to be changed. There's going to be a lot of litigation. There's going to be a lot of judges that are going to need to, make the right decision. And so, the language, the words matter.
He needs to be bold.
Matters.
This is a time for him to be bold.
Look at
to
some
the
of the
extent that
greatest.
it's successful, to the extent that it'll be successful, will depend in part upon Doge's efforts to shrink the federal workforce, bringing them back to work as people retire, because as long as you have the entrenched swamp that was not drained in his first 4 years, they will fight. Trump can have the best goals, but they will fight tooth and nail to slow walk anything. It will help that Trump's Justice Department will no longer be defending these bad rules in court. But unless you get rid of a lot of the people lower down below the political appointees that actually do the rule writing and hearings and stuff like that, he's going to have problems. So that's why overturning the workforce, getting rid of the so-called career employees. Oh, we've been here forever. We know the stuff. Getting rid of them is going to be key to success.
It is, but what I'm communications and narrative. That's like where that's my world in a lot of ways, media. And when you think of some of the people like Walter Williams, he was phenomenal in simplifying complex economic problems to the everyday person and changing the premise. Thomas Sowell, a similar way. You have people like Milton Friedman do it on economics. And even people who do it in an incredible way, who's not even part of us, is someone like Michael Schellenberger, who takes it from a former Marxist perspective. And he has unbelievable impact among Democrats and independents and lefties in influencing them. What we fail to have is anyone ever in power, other than Donald Trump and other than briefly Scott Pruitt, to actually push back on this narrative. It is critically important. Steve mentioned the court cases. When you come in with the premise that, yes, climate's a crisis and yes, net zero is important, but this may have gone too far or whatever, you lose on the immediately. So it is important. But ultimately, he's going to do what Donald Trump wants. It's going to be a great agenda. This political theater, though, has huge implications down the line. It affects everything. And the media keeps feeding it. If they sense you're weak on this or capitulate, they're going to keep hitting them. Senator Inhofe never had the problem with the media because he would, how much funding do you get? Not enough when you look at how much, the oil industry is given to the climate alarmists. He would shut down reporters. Chris Wright doesn't have that DNA.
Yeah, this was a good opportunity for him to step up. There will be more opportunities coming up to get our message out. There will be hearings held. Mike Lee's going to be holding hearings, and we have an opportunity when he does that to have a Steve Milloy or Will Happer or Steve Koonin up there and testifying. Greg Wrightstone. There you go.
Burnett.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Assistant Secretary Steve Milloy and Deputy Secretary Marc Morano.
Well, it's also important who Chris Wright appoints at Interior. We already know the number 2 at EPA, if I'm not mistaken, is an embedded sort of Washington lobbyist lawyer who's, again, it just means, here's what it means. We're at a moment in history where we could try unbelievable things. And it just means that these key people in positions are going to be thinking of their future and limiting themselves. And that's sort of what happens is everything looks rosy after you win an election. And then as it gets closer and closer, reality hits. And as you mentioned, and this is true, Jim, Steve and I are definitely jaded inside the Beltway our whole lives. We see it, we know what's coming, and we know how the game is played. So we see this is like the early signs of cancer right now. We're screaming, you need to get on that right now. And everyone's like, it's fine. Let it go. It'll see what develops. We see the cancer growing.
You just won't let me be happy for 5 minutes.
Sorry.
Minutes.
We'll talk about all this a lot more tomorrow with Lee Zeldin.
Oh, God. We should probably suspend the broadcast for tomorrow. Sorry.
No, But
I'll fill the optimist role with Jim because I'm still
Thank you,
optimistic.
Carbon King. Thank you.
Marc just mentioned the Washington guy that will be the deputy administrator at EPA. And, so I checked with my friends at the law firm and, he's supposedly a solid guy and that's all fine. But what he doesn't know is he doesn't know the EPA issue, the substance of the EPA issues. He doesn't know the science. So you're going to get rolled by the staff every time when you get to issues like microplastics, PFAS, all these things, because you don't understand the core issues.
We can save some of that for the Zeldin,
Yeah,
because I think we're going to do a live stream on that too.
We are.
No, but it's the same thing here. He doesn't really understand the core issues. I almost like, is he playing us because he's an oil guy? And I don't know.
I think he does understand the core
Chris
issues.
Wright. I don't have a sense of that.
I think he might understand the core issues. I think he's playing a role here for the nomination. And
he's a political.
I would think he doesn't need. Look.
Hey, you want to really have fun? Let's cover Burgum's nomination live. That would be fun.
There you go.
You'd probably be banned from the internet for that one.
But if you read Liberty Energy's ESG report, he knows the issues. I mean, he brought up the Sri Lanka thing in his ESG report. He knows these issues. The data in that report is unbelievable. The fact that he said stuff publicly here, I think he is mistakenly trying to appeal to the normies, right? The people who are like the rhino position on all of this stuff.
He may not care. Hold it. He may not care what he says here and whether it makes him look bad when he goes back on it as the director of the DOA. That's like the Supreme Court justices. Kenyatta Jackson Brown. Oh, I uphold the Second Amendment. Oh, yes, I would hold precedent on the Second Amendment. And then the first hearing she has, the Second Amendment's got to go. Look, she didn't care. She wanted to get in the position. She got there, and then she did what she's going to do anyway. And she doesn't care about their opinions. And the carping from the right, in her case, it'll be carping from the left, and everyone else will be saying, "Good job, the people on the right." But it's image. It's getting through the hearings.
What Wright could have done on a lot of these climate questions, I mean, if he really is one of us versus one of them, is to say, well, I'll get back to you on that. Okay. I mean, that happens quite a bit in these hearings. You don't have to sit there and commit like he does and, bow down to the climate god.
Yeah, I think Linnea, you're on to something. He's speaking swamp is what he's doing, in my opinion, during this hearing.
He's never been here before.
And I had the distinct pleasure to provide some input and assist with the first iteration, the first version of his Bettering Human Lives report. I have the latest right here in front of me. It's really good. Chris was very involved in the process of creating that, massive document with a lot of facts and statistics about energy poverty.
There's charts in there that are right out of Climate at a Glance from the Heartland Institute too. I mean, he's pulled from our material. He's worked with a ton of different organizations on that kind of stuff. So it's just surprising and a little bit disheartening to hear this. But I understand what he's doing. I just wish that he hadn't.
I would respond. Jackie Layton asked, "Isn't that dishonest?" The short answer is yes. The longer answer is he's learning politics pretty quick. Politicians lie. How do you know when a politician is lying? His mouth is open and moving.
But Sterling, but what an opportunity to, if he really believes in what he put in that ESG report, if he really believes it and he really thinks that fossil fuels are the greatest things in sliced bread and they help human flourishment, what an opportunity to sit there and talk about that.
Which is fine.
I understand. Climate change. He's going to be helping more people, educate more people by telling them how great fossil fuels are. And instead, he's just pandering to, these idiots who just want subsidies. It's wrong.
I have to say something here. Sterling, you need to take that comment about politicians back. Jason Isaac, the Carbon King, is a former politician, and his wife is a current politician. So you must amend that remark right now.
He is a former politician because he he was an honest man. The politicians that don't lie either don't last long or are relegated to the back bench.
No, but Sterling, it doesn't matter. He's going to get confirmed. There's no Republican that's going to vote against him with Donald Trump right now. There's no Republican.
I would wager if he came out against CCS, I would wager if he publicly came out and said CCS is bunk, he would lose Republicans. He would lose Kramer.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Look, if Hegseth can get confirmed with everything that's been said about him, this guy would get he could say anything he wanted. Trump is for him. He would get confirmed.
Well, we disagree.
Jason, maybe you can comment on this. I mean, I want to wait to see what happens when he gets in. I mean, I am as disappointed with some of this rhetoric as everybody else on this stream. But, to me, I'm trying to look at it positively instead of cynically. Maybe he's just trying to reduce the headwinds that every Trump EPA or energy or climate person is going to have. I remember how tough, Scott Pruitt had it. It was absurd that the attacks on him were constant. So to me, Jason, maybe, we can just kind of keep it in the background. But, if I'm going into a new job and I have a big agenda, I try to reduce the headwinds as much as I could, even if it makes some of my allies uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you've got to think about the people that he's been visiting with over the last few weeks since his nomination. I would say that, of this panel of senators that we're seeing today on this committee, Mike Lee is probably the only one in their conversation that did not talk about carbon capture, that did not talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and all the grift and this green new scam amount of money that's coming into their districts. He's probably the only, or their states. He's probably the only one that didn't. And then in visiting with the general population of the Senate, maybe Ted Cruz. There's probably a couple of other names that I could come up with off the top of my head that didn't talk about climate alarmism.
We're talking. Hickenlooper is asking about climate change again. We might want to hear that.
Oh, let's listen in.
But it's clean. It has high temperature capability. It can do so many things if we could figure out how to deal with the waste.
Yeah, and I think that the concern of kids and us when we were young and everyone else of nuclear and of climate change, they're all very justified concerns. These are real things. Radioactive materials are dangerous. But fortunately, I think with engineering and sensible regulation and safeguards, I think the nuclear waste problem is one of the most manageable problems because the volume of waste is relatively small. Like we've been selling commercial nuclear power for over 70 years, and all of that waste today is in swimming pools on location, cooling off at the start, and then it's in big dry casks right on location in urban or suburban areas. So, and it's been there for 70 years. And the radioactivity near those power plants is lower than Grand Central Station in New York City, the subway station. So I think even without permanent repository, we've been able to do that in a safe way. It's better in the long run to have a more remote, probably deep storage, but there's many ways to do it. I think the politics of it are the trickiest part, but they matter. You need to have people on board. We don't want people with fear and anxiety about what's going on. So it's a political and social challenge, but technically, can we deal with nuclear waste safely? I believe firmly we can, and we have.
Well, thank you. And I'm out of time, but I think that discussion, we're going to have to figure out how to have that national discussion.
Well, let's just get back to this climate thing for a second.
Engineering.
Here's why it's important.
That is.
Okay. So we all want the Trump administration to roll back the EPA endangerment finding. What he did today is just make that more difficult. Okay, just in this exchange with Hickenlooper, he just said that climate change was a real concern again, and it's going to be very difficult for it's going to be that much more difficult for EPA to roll back the endangerment finding and say that carbon is not a threat to public, the public and public welfare, based on what he said. And there's just, it's ridiculous. It's very disappointing.
And what's incredible is CNN just had the story last week, or I guess it was earlier this week, about the polling data, which shows Americans have no change in skepticism in 35 years. The CNN analyst was just going on and saying polling shows Americans are no more really worried about climate change than they were 35 years ago. None of it works. The majority of the public isn't even with them on this, and yet they still feel the need to capitulate. And that's anyway. I think we've made the point on that. So
No, and
this
this
is political theater. It's just disappointing.
Yeah, no, but even in this last comment about nuclear waste, he compared. He said that there are more emissions from the New York City subway than from the nuclear waste storage, and that's true. But yet he goes, but people are afraid anyway. Well, they're afraid because you don't really emphasize that point, because you give credence to climate change, but you don't talk about the BS behind.
We're about to get some more comments from Chris.
Thank
Hang
you,
on.
Senator, for that. I'll end with just a couple comments that have been in my mind. One is to come back to Senator Heinrich and say that New Mexico has fantastic solar and wind resources, and you've responsibly developed them. So, look, I don't want you to feel there's more tension or disagreement there than it sounds like. The other thing I'll end with, and I think we share that, everyone in this room, is that the importance of energy and the affordability of it. 10% of Americans got a disconnection notice to their utilities in the last 12 months. More than 20% of Americans report struggles paying their bills, whether it's paying their energy bills, whether it's filling their car with gas or heating their home or paying their electricity bill. So this is important. It's not just important for national security and industry and all that. It's important for the quality of life of every American. So I thank everyone on this committee to be dedicated to energy and natural resources. I'm would be honored to work with you all on this just critically important thing. And energy is the infrastructure of life. It's what makes everything possible. Thank you all for the great dialogue questions today, and thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wright. I really appreciate you being here. My colleagues and I, we can be a lively bunch, and you've handled our questions, responded well to them, and I appreciate your family coming. I want to thank the members of the committee staff, and especially the Capitol Police who have been here today to keep us safe and keep things orderly. Thank you for your work. The record for today will stand open and ready to receive questions for the record until 6 p.m. today. And we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, our final eco protester ticker is stuck at 5 for quite a long time. I had a new one for number 6.
Relatively short and not so sweet.
Yeah, that's good. And look, and from the looks on the camera there, the only people that watched the whole thing were us and the people on this stream, because most of the senators asked their questions and then got the hell out of there. So interesting. With all of our heated discussions here, I'm thinking, gosh, what are they saying over on the climate alarmist watch party? I can't even imagine. I'll have to.
Well, what's funny is what they're saying is what was going on in the protesters. He couldn't say anything that would make them happy.
Yeah, they still see him as a solid climate denier, and he's evil, and regardless of what he says, this was very similar to a Supreme Court nominee where they ask him about Roe v. Wade, and they just dance around the issue. Although the nominees for Supreme Court do it more deftly, they don't usually embrace the other premise. They don't talk about abortion being a right in that case with Roe v. Wade. They would just talk about, well, I don't comment on cases like that.
Well, there's a way to field these questions. There's a way to field these questions that doesn't just make you look like a fool.
Well, fingers crossed he'll come back. He'll come back to where he was with his ESG report, and be the brave person once he's in office, and just hopefully it's just an aberration.
But let me just tell you, the appeal to Donald Trump is he's the same guy in front of every audience, whether it's you people that hate him, people that love him, and that is, I think, his true genius, and he just can't get that message to his cabinet.
Yeah, Donald Trump never says climate change is real. Never.
Maybe this will be a virtue of Wright, is that you're right. He wasn't deft. He didn't handle things as well as other people have and might. But maybe that's because he's not a politician historically, and so
he's very political today.
Well, one day in 2 weeks doesn't make him an expert speaking before Congress.
No, but Sterling, come on, he has had well thought out positions. He's, as Linnea said, she's talked with him. He has expressed, reasonable thoughts, and with Greg as well. And then he didn't get to someplace where it matters, and all of a sudden whatever you want.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I agree.
I
agree.
expected him not to give it. He should have not given an inch. Don't back up. Would any of us up there? We've all testified in Congress, at least most of us. We don't give an inch, do we?
No, but we're not up for a position that you've got a 53 margin. And I'm telling you, I truly believe he would not get Kramer's vote. He would not get McClintock's, the Pennsylvania guy's vote if he said no CCS. It's stupid. Yeah. We're not going to give any more money to that, and we're going to claw back every dollar of IRA. Okay. I think he wouldn't get the votes.
I mean, that could be.
Okay, Sterling, all he's got to do is say, okay, I'm going to do what the law says. And the law provides for it right now. He doesn't have to buy into climate change. He doesn't have to buy into, just like Hegseth said yesterday, I'm going to follow the law. So the law right now is CCS and you get subsidized for it. You don't have to embrace the underlying nonsense that, went into it.
No, you're right. You're right.
All right.
Well, I'm
He's going to be the first Secretary of Energy that has experience working in the energy industry. I think it's going to be absolutely transformative. I'm still optimistic. I've known Chris for years. Yes, he is not a politician. He was not wearing a MAGA hat during his confirmation hearing today. Steve could have run one over to him really quick because he's got a whole bunch right behind him. But he wasn't doing that. He was, again, I think he was speaking swamp today because that's what he's been hearing for the last few weeks from these politicians that love going back into the states they serve and talking about all the tax dollars they've brought with them. Granted, they're incredibly inflationary tax dollars that are crushing the least among us. And that is something that Chris has studied for decades, how energy affects poverty. And so I think underlying, he understands that and is going to do a great job as the next Secretary of Energy. I think the challenge for us, because I'm one of these big, I've got to accept responsibility. And if there are members of the U.S. Senate that are talking about stupid things like carbon capture that don't do anything to mitigate a changing climate, they just make everything more expensive, then that means that we've got more work to do to educate their staff, to educate those members of the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House of Representatives. I know here we're an army of 7 on this live stream. There's a few more of us in our coalition. We've got some real work to do. That's the challenge. The people that are watching, throw that QR code back up for the Heartland Institute so that you can hire some more people to join our army to educate policymakers, not only in Washington, D.C., but at the state levels as well, because we are up against absolute billions, if not trillions of dollars that are brainwashing not only the current generation of leaders, but the next generation of leaders. Off my soapbox, help us out so that we can help bring back some realism back to people in the halls of Congress and capitals around the country.
Gosh, Jason, that was so good. It's like you're a professional or something.
I would just end it there.
Yeah.
Anybody else needs a sideline talk speech, just call me. I will pep you up.
All right, hold on. Before we close, I know we still got, we had more than 3,000 people watching us today on YouTube, Rumble, and X on several streams. This is fantastic. This is a special episode of the Climate Realism Show, which we air every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And the good news, this was our first watch party, and it's not going to be our last. Tomorrow at the same time, I believe, guys, it's also 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be doing the same thing, streaming the hearing for Lee Zeldin, who is up for administrator of the EPA. Steve Milloy knows quite a lot about that. He was on the EPA transition team for Trump first time around. And so you are going to want to come back here and bring some friends to watch that stream and listen to the best commentary you will find anywhere. And if you happen to find a climate alarmist watch party for any of those things, you can drop them in the comments because I'd like to go look at them later because that will be maybe as entertaining and informative, certainly not as informative as this one. So I want to thank Steve Milloy, Marc Morano, Linnea Lueken, Sterling Burnett, Gregory Wright-Stone, Jason Isaac, the Carbon King, and everyone who attended and watched this wonderful watch party. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Keep living the high carbon lifestyle.
There you go.